Hey friends! Glad you're here at Muse Fanfiction. We've cooked up something special. What if Harry discovered the Millennium puzzle at Privet Drive and awakened ancient shadow magic? Liking and subscribing really helps us out. Okay, story time. Chapter 1. The puzzle in the dark. The cupboard smelled the same as it always had, dust and old rubber and something that might have been mildew if Harry had ever dared to complain about it, which he hadn't, because complaining led to Uncle Vernon's face going that particular shade of purple that preceded shouting. Harry had lived under the stairs at number 4, Privet Drive for as long as he could remember, and he had learned, the way animals learn, not to draw attention to himself unnecessarily. It was the last Sunday of July, and Aunt Petunia had given him a list. He'd already scrubbed the kitchen tiles, rehung the curtains in the sitting room, weeded the flower beds along the front path, spending 45 minutes on his knees in the sun while Dudley ate a calippo on the step and watched, and now he was here, in the cupboard, because Petunia wanted it cleared out for Dudley's old things. Dudley's second bedroom was full of Dudley's things. The sitting room occasionally contained Dudley's things. The garden shed technically belonged to Dudley's broken bicycle. And now the cupboard, Harry's cupboard, the only space that had ever, even in the most grudging sense, belonged to him, was to be cleared for an overflow of Dudley's things. He was not allowed to feel angry about this, so he didn't. Or rather, he'd gotten very good at not knowing what he felt. He started pulling things out. There wasn't much of his, a few dog-eared library books, a pair of trainers that Dudley had grown out of, a torch that only worked if you held it at an angle, a broken toy soldier with one arm missing. These went into a black bag. The rest was Vernon's, old filing boxes, a broken desk lamp, a cardboard box of Christmas decorations that had gone moldy at the edges. Harry moved them into the hallway, where they sat looking forlorn on the carpet runner, waiting for Vernon to decide they were someone else's responsibility. He was halfway under the stairs, flashlight jammed under his arm, when his hand found something that didn't feel like anything else. It was in a gap between two of the wooden support beams, not a place anyone had put it deliberately, Harry thought, or if they had, they'd forgotten about it. He had to squeeze his arm in at an awkward angle to get his fingers around it, and when he pulled it free, he heard a soft sound, just at the edge of hearing, that might have been a voice and might have been nothing. He held it up in the yellow cone of torchlight. It was gold. Or it looked like gold, it had that same warmth under the light, a deep, almost amber quality that suggested great age. It was a pyramid, roughly the size of his two fists together, and it was made of interlocking pieces, panels and wedges and flat triangular sections that had been separated into individual parts but were still somehow held together, as if they were magnetically attracted to each other but hadn't been arranged correctly. Across its surface, faint lines were cut into the metal, strange symbols that looped and crossed, some of which looked almost like the Egyptian hieroglyphics Harry had once seen in a library book about ancient history. On what he assumed was the front face, there was an eye. Not a drawing of an eye, it was deeper than that, as if the metal itself had formed into it, a stylized design with a pupil that seemed to catch the torchlight in a way that no plain metal surface should. Harry stared at it for a moment. It stared back. He should, he knew, add it to the bin bag. Or leave it in the hallway for Vernon to deal with. It wasn't his, it had been wedged in a gap in the structural wood of a house he didn't own, and it clearly wasn't Dudley's because Dudley would have broken it or lost interest in 5 minutes. It was old. It was strange. It made the air around it feel slightly different, not colder, exactly, more like the way air feels just before it rains, when the pressure has changed but the sky hasn't caught up yet. Harry put it in his pocket. He finished clearing the cupboard. He ate the dinner Petunia left for him, smaller than what Dudley got, slightly colder by the time he was allowed to sit down, but food, and then he went back to the cupboard and sat cross-legged on his cot with the golden puzzle in his lap and the torch propped against the wall, and he looked at it for a long time. He told himself he just wanted to understand what it was. He was curious. He'd always been curious, it was one of the things that made teachers like him until someone told them not to, one of the things that Vernon found vaguely threatening about a child who asked too many questions. Harry had learned to ask his questions silently, internally, in the dark, where no one could find them. This was a question he could actually answer. He turned the puzzle over in his hands. The pieces moved under his fingers with a resistance that felt almost purposeful, like pushing against someone's hand, not against a mechanical catch. He could feel the structure of it somewhere beneath conscious thought, the way the pieces were meant to fit together, and before he properly decided to try, his fingers were moving, sliding a wedge section counterclockwise, locking a flat panel into the groove it created, pressing two triangular faces together along their longest edge. It clicked. Just once, just that first piece, but the sound it made wasn't quite mechanical. It had a resonance to it that the metal didn't justify, a note that Harry felt more than heard, somewhere in his chest, like a tuning fork struck against his sternum. He kept going. He lost track of time the way he sometimes did when he was reading a book that was particularly good, or when he was doing long division in his head and the numbers got complicated enough to take up all the space in his skull. The puzzle demanded his entire attention, not because it was difficult, exactly, but because solving it required something other than logical thought, something more like listening. He had to follow the feeling of rightness, the barely there sense of each piece knowing where it wanted to be, and his hands learned the language of it faster than he would have expected. He didn't notice when midnight passed. He didn't notice when the streetlight outside his tiny window shifted, a car going by, shadows swinging across the ceiling. He noticed the thunder, dimly, somewhere around what might have been 2 a.m, a low, rolling sound with no rain behind it, which was strange. The last piece clicked into place at 3:15. Harry looked down at the completed pyramid sitting in his palms, golden and suddenly whole, and the eye on the front face seemed to glow for just a moment, soft, amber, like candlelight seen through amber glass, and then the pressure in the air, that electric pre-storm quality that had followed the puzzle since he'd picked it up, released. It didn't vanish. It bloomed. Harry felt something like a hand on his shoulder, except there was no hand, and it wasn't on his shoulder, it was more like someone standing at his back. Someone close. The presence of another person in a space where there was no other person, and Harry, who had slept alone in a cupboard under the stairs for as long as he could remember, sat very still and thought about how he should probably be frightened and wasn't, quite. You solved it. The voice was inside his head. Not in the way thoughts are inside your head, not like hearing words you're thinking at yourself. This was a voice with depth to it, a timbre, a quality of age and command that made Harry's own internal voice sound very young by comparison. It had an accent he couldn't identify, not British, not American, something older and elsewhere, with vowels that sat differently in the mouth than English vowels. Harry looked at the puzzle. The puzzle was still. I did, he said, very quietly, so as not to wake the Dursleys. A pause. In the pause, Harry had the distinct impression of someone taking stock of their surroundings, not panicking, not confused, just the careful, assessing silence of someone who has woken up somewhere unfamiliar and is determining the facts before responding. I see. Another pause. You are young. 10, Harry said. Almost 11. You solved a 3,000-year-old puzzle constructed to resist any mind not sufficiently aligned with its purpose. The voice carried this without emphasis, the way someone states a fact that speaks for itself. And you are almost 11. I had a while, Harry said. I couldn't sleep anyway. Something shifted in the presence at his back. If Harry had to name it, he would have called it the sensation of someone deciding not to say what they were first thinking, and choosing something gentler instead. My name was Atem. I am, the Pharaoh of Kemet. The puzzle you have completed is called the Millennium Puzzle, and it contains my soul. Or a part of it. The part that could not rest. A pause that felt weighted with something enormous, carried lightly. Who are you? Harry. Harry Potter. Harry Potter, Atem repeated, with the deliberate quality of someone who is filing the information away and intending to keep it. And where are we? Harry looked around the cupboard. The coats hanging above him. The one small window with its sliver of suburban night sky. The bare wooden walls. His cot with its single flat pillow and the blanket that was almost too small. Under the stairs, he said. Another pause. This one had a different quality, longer, with something sharp in it that Harry couldn't identify, though it made the small hairs on his arms stand up. Tell me about yourself, Atem said finally. Not as a social nicety. As someone beginning to understand a situation and requiring more data. So Harry told him. He didn't know why, he wouldn't normally have, would have deflected and made small, self-deprecating noises the way he'd learned to around the Dursleys, the way you learn to make yourself smaller in spaces where your size is already a point of contention. But the voice in his head didn't feel like the Dursleys. It felt like something else entirely, like a room with more space in it than you expected, a door opening onto a larger corridor. He told Atem about the cupboard, and about number 4 Privet Drive, and about Dudley and Vernon and Petunia, and about school, the way he'd been quietly, methodically kept from excelling, the way he always seemed to know things he hadn't been taught and couldn't explain, the way strange things happened around him sometimes that he'd learned to stop mentioning. The time the glass at the zoo had disappeared and a boa constrictor had gotten out, though Harry had a feeling about that one. The time his hair had grown back overnight after Aunt Petunia cut it badly. The time he'd landed on a school roof without quite understanding how he'd gotten there. Atem listened without interrupting, which was itself remarkable, because Harry had found that most people interrupted when he was talking, or their attention wandered, or they started to look uncomfortable at the details. Atem listened the way someone listens who is building a picture, precise and patient, and when Harry ran out of things to say there was a silence that felt almost respectful. You are a wizard, Atem said. People keep, well, no one's actually said that to me specifically. But something like that. Not something like that. Precisely that. I have seen wizards, what you would call magic users, in my own time. They were rarely this untrained and rarely this powerful. A note entered his voice that was not quite warmth, but was in the same family. The things you describe, accidental magic, it is called in your tradition, are consistent with enormous untapped potential restrained by circumstance. Harry turned the Millennium puzzle over in his hands. It was warm in a way gold shouldn't be, room temperature metal taken a fraction past comfort. And the puzzle? What does it, what are you, exactly? Like, what does this mean? You're in my head. I am in the puzzle, and the puzzle is with you. When you carry it, I am, present. Aware. I can speak to you, and you to me, though only you can hear my voice. He paused. I was a pharaoh who sealed away a darkness, my own darkness, into the puzzle, along with my memories and my power. I intended it to be permanent. I see now that 3,000 years have passed since that night, and that the world has changed considerably. Quite a lot, Harry agreed. There was something almost dry in it. I will need time to understand the present. I am, working from context. I can help with that, Harry said, because it was the obvious thing to offer, and because he meant it, and because something about the presence of Atem in the quiet dark of his cupboard made Harry feel, for the first time in memory, that the space under the stairs might not be entirely lonely. I've got library books. I have observed that, Atem said. The almost dryness again. You appear to have approximately 7 books on ancient Egyptian history. I like history. Then we will get along, the pharaoh said, and there was something in it that wasn't quite a smile but suggested the shape of one, quite well. They talked until dawn. Harry didn't mean for it to go that long, or rather, he lost track of it going that long, which was different. Atem asked questions in the precise, unhurried way of someone who has never needed to rush and has all the patience of accumulated centuries, and his questions were good ones, the kind Harry had to actually think about to answer. He asked about the structure of British government and about airplanes and about the 2 world wars and about electricity, all of which Harry explained as best he could with the help of the history books, holding pages up to the torch so Atem could read them. Atem, it turned out, could read. Apparently the soul inside the Millennium puzzle adapted to its carrier in some functional way, because he could read English without effort, and could follow Harry's explanations with a facility that was slightly unsettling. He also occasionally made connections that Harry found genuinely startling, drawing lines between the governance structures Harry described and analogous systems in ancient Kemet, pointing out where what sounded like magic in Harry's accidental incidents actually had names and properties and traditions Harry had never heard of. Shadow magic, Atem said, around 5 in the morning, when they'd been discussing Harry's more inexplicable incidents. What you call accidental magic, in at least 2 of those instances, was not conventional, what I would call Ka-based, manifestation. It was shadow-based. The incident with the glass is typical of Ka, intent, emotion, raw power breaking through restraint. The roof, that was a shadow step. Something very old. What's the difference? Ka magic is the magic of the living self, will, emotion, vital force. Most wizards in my era used it, though they rarely called it that. It is intuitive and powerful and, in your word, normal. A pause, considering. Shadow magic is older. It is the magic of Duat, of the space between what is seen and what is. It operates differently. Subtly at its weakest, catastrophically at its strongest. It does not respond only to intent. It responds to truth. He let that sit for a moment. Someone with genuine affinity for shadow magic is very rare. In my time, I knew of perhaps 3 in my entire reign. And I was a pharaoh of the new kingdom with access to the best seers in Egypt. Harry was quiet for a moment. Outside, the sky was beginning to go a paler gray at the edges. And you think I have it? I think you are 10 years old and have shadow-stepped at least twice without training, Atem said, with that same flat matter-of-factness, and that the moment you completed the Millennium puzzle, I felt your shadow the way I used to feel my own kingdom, large and deep, and entirely uncharted. A pause. So yes. I think that may be an understatement. Harry looked at his hands in the grey pre-dawn light. Right, he said. You don't seem surprised. I've always known I was different. The Dursleys told me it was wrong, but I always thought it was more interesting than wrong. Something warm moved through the presence at his back, through Atem's presence, because Harry was already, without quite noticing, thinking of it as a specific thing with a specific quality, distinct and familiar. That, Atem said, is exactly the right perspective. The morning came in stages. First the birdsong, then the sound of Petunia's alarm clock through the ceiling, then the sound of Vernon clearing his throat in that preliminary way that meant he was awake and already building towards something. Harry tucked the Millennium puzzle under his thin pillow, lay back, and closed his eyes, and was staring peacefully at the back of his eyelids when he heard, over the rising morning sounds of number 4, there is a letter. He opened his eyes. What? Approaching. Something deliberate in its movement, I can feel it through the shadow. A pause. It is addressed to you. The letterbox rattled. From under his pillow, Harry could feel the puzzle grow slightly warmer. He waited. He heard the letterbox rattle twice more, which was unusual. The post didn't come until after 8, and it was barely past 6. He heard Petunia's footsteps in the hallway, a pause, a sharp intake of breath, and then silence that had a particular quality to it, the silence of someone standing very still and deciding what to do. He waited some more. The puzzle hummed faintly under his pillow. She has taken it, Atem said. Yes. You knew she would. I figured, Harry said. He hadn't known there would be a letter, not specifically, but he had known for a long time that something was coming, the way you know a weather change before it arrives, the way something in your bones tells you the season is shifting. He'd felt it all summer, a low vibration like a distant engine, and now the Millennium puzzle sat warm under his pillow and a letter had come for him at 6 in the morning, and Harry stretched his arms over his head and stared at the ceiling of his cupboard and felt, for the first time in a long time, that things were about to change. She will not give it to you, Atem said. Not a question. No. There will be more letters. Probably. When they come, Atem said carefully, do not let them take those as well. No, Harry agreed. He paused. Atem? Yes. How do you know there'll be more? A pause that contained, Harry was beginning to understand, something like a slight smile. Because whatever sent this letter knew it was sending it to a household that would refuse it. And they sent it anyway. That suggests either great confidence that they will eventually succeed, or great confidence that you will ensure they do. Another pause. Given what I have seen of your shadow tonight, I suspect both. That afternoon, Harry was given a proper bedroom. Not because Petunia had a change of heart. Not because Vernon had become a reasonable man overnight. Because someone, Harry's best guess was the same someone who had addressed a letter to the cupboard under the stairs, had apparently known exactly how to phrase that address in a way that made Vernon Dursley uncomfortable enough about what the neighbors might think to move Harry upstairs into Dudley's second bedroom, which smelled of old sweets and contained 4 broken televisions and approximately 200 smelting sticks. Dudley objected loudly. Vernon objected loudly. Harry moved his things without comment, folding the blanket and tucking the Millennium puzzle under his arm, and climbed the stairs to his new room with the particular equilibrium of a person who has decided that the world has changed and who intends to change with it. Better, Atem said approvingly, as Harry surveyed the room. Still 4 broken televisions. The space is larger. The window is adequate. The structural defensibility is improved. Harry looked at him, or rather, looked at the puzzle in his hand, because that was where Atem was in any physically meaningful sense. Were you also a general, he asked. Or just a pharaoh? The two were not separable, Atem said. In Kemet, the pharaoh is the army's first general, the kingdom's first priest, and the living avatar of Roswell on Earth. A pause. I was also, periodically, a duelist. But that is a longer conversation. I have time, Harry said, sitting cross-legged on Dudley's old bed, which was more comfortable than his cot had been by a significant margin. Yes, Atem said. You do. The letters kept coming. Every day, more of them, slid under the door, dropped through the letterbox in increasing numbers, eventually arriving through seemingly impossible methods that made Vernon increasingly purple. By the 4th day, Harry had counted 9 letters taken from him before he could touch them. By the 6th day, he'd started positioning himself near the letterbox in the mornings, but Petunia always got there first, with a speed that was frankly impressive for a woman in a dressing gown. She is afraid, Atem observed, on the 6th morning, as Harry watched his aunt's back retreating down the hallway with a fistful of letters. Not of the letters specifically. Of what they represent. A world she chose to leave. She knows about magic. Harry said. They had been keeping their voices low, Harry's whisper, Atem's internal voice, both calibrated to privacy. She knows about you. Or about what you are. She has been choosing not to know since before you arrived. He paused. The fear is not the interesting part. The interesting part is what drives someone to choose smallness for 10 years. What does? Grief, Atem said, quietly. And the rage that comes after. She lost her sister and built a wall. People who build walls always make them too thick. Harry was quiet for a long moment, watching the hallway where Petunia had disappeared. Does that mean I should feel sorry for her? It means you should understand her, Atem said. That is different. Understanding is a tool. Forgiveness is a choice for later, when you have more information. A pause. Or not. Also a choice. The letters peaked on the Sunday, hundreds of them, by Vernon's own terrified count, stuffing themselves through every aperture in the house, and then, after a night in a hotel and a night on a rock in the middle of the sea, a knock at the door that Harry already knew the answer to, because Atem had felt the approach from a long way off. Large, Atem said, a moment before the knock came. Very large. Magic of a specific type, older tradition, very British, carries an institutional quality. A pause. And a warm shadow. A good person. Harry looked at the door. Rain slashed the windows. His uncle was scrambling for his shotgun, which Harry had some thoughts about. Friendly, Harry said, not quite a question. Very, Atem said. Clumsy, too, in the way of people who are genuinely kind and have never needed to be otherwise. The door came off its hinges. Rubeus Hagrid filled the doorframe in a way that no human being should physically be able to fill a doorframe. He was enormous in a way that made Harry blink and recalibrate several assumptions about human scale, with a wild black beard and beetle-black eyes and an expression of broad, genuine pleasure that was so completely unguarded it was almost startling after a childhood of carefully managed Dursley facial expressions. "Harry Potter," he boomed, and the boom was warm, fully, completely warm, the warmth of someone who has been looking forward to this for a very long time. He looked down at Harry. Harry looked up at him. Something about the genuine, uncomplicated delight on Hagrid's face did something unexpected to Harry's chest, a small crack in something that had been sealed for a long time. "Hello," Harry said. Vernon was purple and reaching for the gun. "I wouldn't do that," Harry said, very quietly, and something in his voice, something that hadn't been there a week ago, some new layer underneath the careful surface of a boy who'd learned to be invisible, made Vernon freeze with his hand on the barrel. Hagrid looked at Harry with a curious, uncertain expression, the look of someone who expected one thing and found another. "Right then," he said, setting his enormous umbrella against the wall. "I know why you're here," Harry said. "The letters. Hogwarts." "Yeah," Hagrid said, studying him with those warm, slightly uncertain eyes. "Yeah, no, then." "Most of it," Harry said. He glanced sideways, not at anything in particular, just the habitual not quite a look of someone consulting something no one else could see. "The parts one don't know, I suspect you'll tell me." "Right," Hagrid said again, and now there was something behind his grin, some wondering quality. "Right, yeah. I will." He pulled a slightly squashed birthday cake from inside his coat, pink icing with, "Happy Birthday Harry," misspelled with 3 P's, and Harry looked at it for a moment, and then he looked up at Hagrid's broad, happy face, and the crack in the sealed thing in his chest widened. "Thank you," Harry said. He meant it absolutely. In the quiet under his voice, barely there, "Happy birthday, Harry Potter," Atem said, and something in the ancient voice was as warm as the torchlight that had lit the puzzle through the long, solved night. Outside, the storm was already passing. Chapter 2, Diagon and the Dark Between Stars. The train to London smelled like Hagrid's coat, damp wool and something smoky and animal, and Harry sat beside the enormous man and watched the English countryside roll past and thought about the night before. Hagrid had talked for hours. He'd told Harry about Voldemort, you know who, he kept saying, with a flinch every time the name came close to his lips, though Harry noticed he never actually said it and filed this away as something to understand later. He'd told him about James and Lily Potter, and about the night in Godric's Hollow, and about the scar, and Harry had listened carefully and said very little, in the way he always listened when something important was being said to him. He'd asked 2 questions. The first was whether his parents had been good people. Hagrid had cried a little, which Harry took as a yes. The second was whether Voldemort was actually dead. Hagrid had hesitated. Which was, Harry thought, also an answer. In his jacket pocket, the Millennium puzzle sat warm and familiar. He'd threaded it on a length of cord from one of Dudley's old trainers, it hung against his chest now, under his shirt, the eye facing outward and sitting just over his heart. He could feel Atem's attention as a constant, quiet presence at the back of his thoughts, like a lamp left on in another room. Not intrusive. There, and warm, and watchful. "He is not being dishonest," Atem had said quietly, while Hagrid was talking. "He is telling you what he believes. He is simply not telling you all of what he knows." Harry had nodded slightly, too small for Hagrid to catch. "I know," he'd said, internally, to his Pharaoh. "Adults rarely do." Now it was morning, and they were on the train, and Harry had a list in his pocket that Hagrid had produced from somewhere in his coat, a Hogwarts school list, parchment that felt different from regular paper, slightly warmer and with a weight that wasn't quite physical. "Leaky Cauldron first," Hagrid said, folding himself out of his seat as the train pulled into King's Cross. People on the train had been staring at him for the entire journey, and Hagrid had ignored it with the easy contentment of someone entirely at peace with taking up more space than others found comfortable. Harry appreciated this quality greatly. "Then Gringotts, you'll want to get your Hogwarts money. Then we can get your supplies." "Gringotts first," Harry said. Hagrid looked at him. "Your money's perfectly safe, Harry, the goblins." "I know," Harry said. "I want to meet the goblins." He paused. "And I'd like to know what's in my vault before I start spending from it." "Is there only one?" Hagrid's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" Harry looked at the Millennium puzzle through his shirt without meaning to, a small unconscious movement that he'd have to learn to stop making in public. It had been Atem who'd raised the question, the night before, when Harry had mentioned his parents and the vault. Wizard families of standing, Atem had said, particularly old ones, tend to have layered inheritance. Whatever was your parents' family vault, and whatever was your parents' personal vault, may not be the same thing. In my experience, and I have some, institutions like your Gringotts will not volunteer information you do not ask for. They respond to authority and to the right questions. "Just want to make sure," Harry said. Hagrid gave him another of those wondering looks, the one he'd been giving Harry since the moment Harry had spoken on the rock and sounded, Hagrid's eyes suggested, not quite like an 11-year-old. Then he shrugged, enormous and amiable. "Right then. Gringotts first." London resolved around them in its typical chaos of noise and smell and grey summer sky. Harry watched it from beside Hagrid, an effective shield against the foot traffic, given his size, and felt the city the way he always felt places, with a fine, attentive awareness of texture and layer. London had a deep shadow, he was beginning to understand. Most very old places did. The puzzle hummed gently against his chest as they walked through streets that got older and quieter and somehow dimmer without the light actually changing. The leaky cauldron was almost invisible, a cramped, dark pub sandwiched between a bookshop and a record store, and Harry watched from beside Hagrid as the people on the pavement walked past it with the particular blank purposelessness of eyes sliding off something they couldn't quite focus on. There was a charm at work there, old and surprisingly elegant. "Layered," Atem said, and Harry could feel his interest quickening, the way a scholar leans forward when they see something new. "Concealment, misdirection, and below those, something else, a recognition ward. It knows who can see it." Inside was dim and warm and smelled of beer and wood smoke, and the people in it were extraordinary. Harry had never been in a room before where every single person was extraordinary, where a woman at the bar had purple hair that was moving in a way that defied any reasonable atmospheric explanation, and an old man in the corner had a coat that kept changing color, and two witches arguing over something near the fireplace both had wands lying on the table between them like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. Harry loved it immediately. He was careful not to show it too much. "Harry." Hagrid's booming announcement of his name made a number of conversations stop and a number of heads turn, and Harry stood very still in the sudden weight of all those eyes and felt the particular quality of how people looked at his scar, the way a wound looks at a scar, recognizing the shape of an old injury. He gave the room a calm, neutral expression and waited for the attention to redistribute itself, which it did, in stages, though a few people kept glancing over. The wall in the courtyard opened to Hagrid's prodding, a specific sequence of taps that Harry watched carefully and memorized, and then Diagon Alley opened before them, and Harry stopped at the entrance and just looked for a moment. It was like every market he'd ever imagined and several he hadn't. The street was narrow and cobbled and crooked, and it was crammed on both sides with shops whose windows contained things that shouldn't be containable in windows, a cauldron that was clearly breathing in the display of a cauldron shop, a set of robes that were walking themselves up and down a fitting stand in a window to Harry's left, owls of every color in their cages, books stacked in impossible towers, the smell of something sweet and something chemical and something that was a color Harry didn't have a name for. "Well," Hagrid said, looking down at him. "It's very real," Harry said, which wasn't what he meant, but was the truest thing he could find. "It is also very new," Atem said, with that scholarly attention Harry was already growing fond of. "Most of what I can sense here is no more than 500 years old." Very young magic. There are older things underneath, though. Much older things. Gringotts was a white marble building at the end of the alley, banked and columned and somehow both impressive and slightly threatening, the way powerful institutions often are. The goblins at the entrance were not what Harry expected. They were shorter, yes, and their faces had a sharpness to them, a precision of feature, that suggested something that had been made with particular purpose. He looked at the nearest one with genuine interest and received a look of flat, assessing intelligence in return. "Respect them," Atem said. "They will know if you don't. Their shadow sense is acute." Harry nodded to the goblin at the door. Not a bob, not a bow, the kind of nod that acknowledges another intelligent entity as an equal. The goblin's eyes sharpened fractionally, the way eyes sharpen when something unexpected happens, and then it returned the nod with a precision that felt like the first move of a negotiation. Inside, in the vast echoing hall, Hagrid approached the counter and spoke to one of the goblins about Harry's vault. Harry stood a step behind him, and while Hagrid was talking, he addressed himself quietly to a different goblin, a senior one, he thought, from the quality of its coat and the particular set of its shoulders. "I'd like to speak with someone about the Potter family accounts," Harry said. "All of them?" The goblin looked at him for a very long moment. Its eyes were amber, Harry noticed, the same deep amber as the Millennium puzzle. "All of them," it repeated, with the careful inflection of someone choosing their words very precisely. "All of them," Harry confirmed. Another pause. "Do you have your key?" "Hagrid," Harry said. Hagrid, mid-sentence with the other goblin, turned and produced a small gold key from somewhere in his enormous coat with the slightly embarrassed expression of someone who has just realized they forgot to hand something over. "Oh, Rye. Here, Harry." Harry passed the key to the senior goblin. It examined it with a magnifying lens produced from a waistcoat pocket, made a sound that was in the space between thoughtful and satisfied, and said, "Ragnarok. Front counter. Potter account review." A different goblin appeared from somewhere with the speed of things that have their own very efficient spatial logic. "Master Potter," it said. "I am Ragnarok. If you'll follow me." They were taken, Harry, Hagrid, and Ragnarok, with Ragnarok setting a brisk pace that Hagrid's long legs matched easily and Harry's short ones had to manage with a slight increase in tempo, into a private room off the main hall, smaller and quieter, with a single large desk and a set of very old ledgers that Ragnarok produced from a locked cabinet. "The Potter accounts," Ragnarok said, opening the ledger, consist of 3 vaults. Vault 713, which is a Hogwarts Trust Fund vault established by your grandparents, that's the one, Hagrid said helpfully. Vault 106, the Potter family vault, principal holdings and ancestral property, which requires blood verification to access, a standard procedure, and Vault 12, which is. Ragnarok paused. Unusual. Harry was very still. Beside him, Hagrid had a slightly puzzled expression. Vault 12. A secondary vault, Ragnarok said, established approximately 200 years ago under the name Potter, with a secondary holding name, Atem, though this appears to have been a formal honorific of some kind, the translation is unclear, tied to a set of conditions that are. He paused again. Also unusual. It has been flagged in our system for 2 centuries as dormant. As of approximately 1 week ago, it registered as active. Hagrid was staring at Harry. Harry was looking at Ragnarok. 1 week ago, Harry said. Yes. Harry touched the puzzle through his shirt, and was careful not to make it obvious. Inside his thoughts, Atem was very quiet in the way of someone who has just been handed an enormous amount of information and is processing it with great precision. 200 years ago, Atem said. Someone knew. Someone in this family, 200 years before your birth, knew to put something aside. I'd like to see what's in Vault 12, Harry said. The cart ride was exactly as terrifying as it looked, and Harry found he didn't mind terrifying. He sat very upright in the cart and watched the tunnels blur past and felt the deep, cold dark of underground spaces pressing at the edges of his awareness. The puzzle was definitely warmer down here, something resonant in the rock itself, some old current of energy that matched something in the shape of what Atem was, and what Harry was, and the two of them together. Vault 713 first, because Hagrid needed something from it that he was keeping studiously vague about and Harry chose not to press. The vault was impressive, full, warm gold, enough to make Harry's head swim with the strangeness of having never had money and now having rather a lot of it. He took enough for his school supplies and the rest he left. Vault 106 was larger and darker and contained things besides gold. Harry stood in the entrance and looked at shelves of books and cases of what appeared to be heirlooms and a locked chest in the corner that had a quality to it he couldn't name, not dangerous, but not empty either. He filed it all away for later. He took nothing from this vault. It felt wrong to take things from a place he didn't yet understand. Vault 12 was the smallest of the three. It was at the end of a tunnel that the goblin cart reached with a slight change in direction that didn't quite match the geometry of what Harry thought the tunnel system looked like, as though this branch existed in a slightly different relationship to space than the others. The vault door was gold rather than stone, and it had a symbol on it that made the hair on Harry's arm stand up, an eye. Not quite identical to the one on the Millennium puzzle, but unmistakably the same tradition, the same language of shape. Ragnarok opened it without comment, though his amber eyes were very attentive. Inside was a single wooden chest. And inside the chest, wrapped in linen that had somehow not aged in 200 years, was a set of cards. They were large, larger than playing cards, rectangular, made of something that wasn't quite paper and wasn't quite wood, with a deep blue-black back and images on the front that Harry lifted one to look at, and then held very still with it in his hands, because the image moved. Not animated exactly, it was more like looking at something through water, seeing something beyond the surface. A creature of shadow and wingspan, enormous, folded into the dimensions of the card but not contained by them. Those, Atem said, and his voice was different, not shaken, exactly, but as close to shaken as Harry had heard it, with something underneath it that was recognition and grief and something he didn't have words for, are shadow cards. My shadow cards. I believed they were lost in Duat when I died. What are they? Harry asked, quietly enough that Hagrid, who was standing respectfully back and pretending not to be enormously curious, didn't catch it. They are power, Atem said simply. Old power. Each one is a piece of the shadow realm made stable, a creature or a force or a truth, bound into form. In my time, we called them dual monsters. The name is a translation of something more ancient that means, roughly, shadow servants. They respond to Ka, to magical will. Used by someone who also carries shadow magic, he paused. They are not small things, Harry. Harry carefully rewrapped them in the linen and put the chest under his arm. Ragnarok said nothing. He was, Harry thought, too professional to comment on what his clients removed from their own vaults, but his amber eyes tracked the chest with a quality of attention that was respectful and sharpened. Back in the alley, in the warm summer afternoon, Hagrid bought Harry a birthday present, a tawny owl, round-faced and imperious and immediately certain of her own superiority, from Elop's Owl Emporium, and Harry named her Ka without quite knowing why, and the owl accepted this as the correct answer. They moved through the rest of the list with Hagrid's cheerful energy and Harry's careful attention. Robes at Madame Malkin's, where Harry stood on the fitting stool and was measured by floating tapes while another boy was measured on the adjacent stool. The boy was blond, pale, expensively presented, and had the particular quality of someone who had never been told no by anyone he considered worth arguing with. He looked at Harry with the reflexive, automatic assessment of someone who has been taught that social hierarchy is expressed through appearance. Hogwarts, the boy said. Yes, Harry said. First year. He cast a glance at Harry's clothes, Dudley's cast-offs, too large, worn at the elbows, and the assessment sharpened slightly. Yes. My name is Malfoy. Draco Malfoy. It was delivered with the confidence of someone who expects that name to mean something. Old family, Atem said, with a scholar's neutrality. He expects recognition. He is accustomed to his name opening doors. Harry, Harry said. Just Harry. No last name offered. Malfoy waited. When nothing else came, a micro-expression of irritation crossed his face and reorganized into something more deliberate. You should know who to associate with, he said. Some families are better than others. You wouldn't want to make the wrong friends. Harry looked at him. Not a confrontational look, just a look, steady and direct, the kind Atem had been teaching him without intending to, the look of someone who has something very old and very confident sitting just behind their eyes. What makes a family better? Harry asked. Malfoy blinked. It wasn't the question he expected. What? You said some families are better than others. I'm asking what makes them better. Harry's voice was mild, genuinely inquiring. Magic? Wealth? History? Malfoy recovered. All of those, he said, with the smooth confidence of someone reciting a lesson. Pure blood, primarily. Proper magical heritage. Interesting, Harry said. And then said nothing else. Malfoy looked at him, and something in Harry's expression, the complete absence of either deference or aggression, just that calm, ancient-eyed attentiveness, made Malfoy's certainty wobble almost imperceptibly. You agree? He said. I didn't say that, Harry said pleasantly. A pause. The floating measuring tape continued its work. Malfoy reassembled his expression. Well. What house are you hoping for? Whichever one suits me, Harry said. I expect I'll find out. That was well done, Atem said. I just told the truth. Yes, the Pharaoh said. That is frequently the most effective approach. Ollivander's was the last stop, and the most interesting. The shop was narrow and dusty and crammed to the ceiling with thin boxes stacked in towers that should have been physically unstable, and Ollivander himself materialized from between two towers with a soundlessness that suggested he'd been there all along or had just arrived from somewhere unreachable. He was pale and silver-haired, with wide, silvery eyes that held the reflective quality of a mirror. They took in light and gave back something that wasn't quite the same light. Harry Potter, he said, with the precise satisfaction of someone crossing an item off a list that has been waiting a very long time. I wondered when I would see you. He came to the counter, moving with a lightness that seemed to belong to a younger body. Your mother, Lily Wood, 10¼ inches, swishy, excellent for charms. Your father, Mahogany, 11 inches, pliable, excellent for transfiguration. His silver eyes rested on Harry's scar, and then on Harry's eyes, and something shifted in them. Yes, he said, very quietly. Yes, there is something different here. He began pulling boxes. It was, Harry understood quickly, a process, a back and forth, a calling and answering, the wand extending some quality of itself and Harry's magic responding or not responding, and Ollivander reading the results with the precise attention of a very old professional. He tried 9 wands. None of them felt right, not exactly wrong, but like trying to write with your non-dominant hand. There was something, Harry thought, but it was reaching the wrong way. The wand makes a sound, Atem said, after the 6th try. A shadow sound. I suspect this is the problem. Harry looked at the counter, where a pile of tried and rejected wands lay. Mr. Ollivander, he said. Yes, we'll find the right one. I'd like to ask you something. Harry paused. Do you have anything with a core that isn't conventional? Not phoenix feather or dragon heartstring or unicorn hair. Ollivander went very still. His silver eyes focused on Harry with a new intensity. What do you mean by conventional? He said carefully. I mean those 3 cover most of what's in this shop, Harry said, looking at the towers of boxes, but they can't cover all of it. Wand making is as old as magic itself. There must be other cores. Ollivander was quiet for a long moment. You are, he said, a most unusual 11-year-old. I've been told, Harry said. You have been told once, Atem pointed out. By you. You count. Another pause, and then Ollivander moved to the very back of the shop, behind a tower of boxes that Harry now noticed were slightly different from the others, older wood, a faint layer of dust that the others didn't have. He returned with a single box, longer and narrower than the others, which he set on the counter and opened with a deliberateness that suggested he'd been keeping it a long time for reasons he hadn't fully understood. 12.5 inches, he said. Ebony. Rigid. And the core. He paused. Shadow resin. From a substance I recovered 40 years ago from an archaeological site in Egypt. It is the only wand I have ever made with this core. I made it because the material required it, not because I had a buyer. I have been quite unable to sell it to anyone. He looked at Harry. It has been waiting. Harry picked up the wand. It was like picking up the Millennium puzzle, the same quality of fit, of something completing a circuit that had been open. The air in the shop shifted, the boxes rustled slightly in their towers, and from the puzzle against his chest, Harry felt Atem's presence surge, not overwhelmed, not distressed, but the way a flame surges when you open a door and air rushes in. Yes, Atem said, and the word was barely contained. Yes, that is it. Harry gave the wand a single, precise movement, not a wave, not the flashy swishes the other wands had prompted, just a controlled, intentional arc. The air in the shop darkened for exactly 1 second, not a frightening darkness, more like the moment before you light a match, the pregnant dark of potential, and then cleared. Ollivander was staring at him. Curious, he said, very softly. Very curious. I have never seen shadow resin respond like that. He paused, and his silver eyes had gone to Harry's chest, where the puzzle hung under his shirt, as if he could see it through the fabric. Something in you has already been awakened. Yes, Harry said. May I ask? It's a family matter, Harry said, pleasantly but finally, and pulled his money from his pocket. Ollivander accepted the payment with a silence that contained a great many unasked questions. Outside in the alley, the afternoon was going golden, and Harry stood in the warm light with his wand and its box in his hand and the puzzle warm against his chest and Ka the owl in her cage and the chest of shadow cards under his arm, and Hagrid looked down at him with his broad, warm, wondering face. Right, then, Hagrid said. Think that's everything. Almost, Harry said. He looked at the alley, at the last of the afternoon shoppers moving through it, at the warm light on the old crooked buildings, at the magical world going about its business around him, large and complicated and ancient in its own way and utterly new in his experience. One more thing. He went back to Flourish and Blots, which they'd visited briefly for his school books, and spent 45 minutes selecting 6 additional books that weren't on the school list. 2 on magical history. 1 on goblin economics. 1 on the history of shadow and dark arts traditions, which the shopkeeper sold him with a slightly uncertain look that Harry met with calm directness. 1 on ancient Egyptian connections to early European magic. And 1 very thin, very old pamphlet on the back of the highest shelf that was titled, in faded gold lettering, On the Nature of Shadow Games, a treatise from the Alexandrian collection. He held this last one up to show Atem, though Atem could see it perfectly well. Where, Atem said, with something that was unmistakably delighted, did you find that? Back shelf, Harry said quietly. Looked like it had been there a while. A while is an understatement. That text was compiled within a century of my death. A pause. The Alexandrian collection referred to in the title is the Great Library's occult archive. Which I was told had been entirely lost. Apparently not entirely, Harry said, and paid for it. Hagrid dropped him at the Dursleys with a train ticket for the 1st of September and a slightly damp farewell that came with a hand on Harry's shoulder, enormous and careful, the way Hagrid did everything, enormous and careful, and the instruction to write if he needed anything. Can I write to you about my books? Harry said. Hagrid looked at him. What, academic-like? About magic. I've got questions. He paused. I learn quickly, but some things are easier to understand when someone explains them. Hagrid's face went through several expressions very quickly and arrived at something that was profoundly touched. Yeah, he said, roughly. Yeah, Course ye can. Harry watched the motorbike lift into the purple evening sky and disappear, and then he turned and went inside. He spent the rest of the summer in a way that confused and vaguely alarmed the Dursleys. He didn't cause trouble. He did his chores without being told. He cooked dinner efficiently and ate what he was given and said please and thank you at the right moments and otherwise made himself very quiet and very uncatchable. In his room, with the door closed, he read. He and Atem talked for hours every day, about magic and about history and about the shadow cards and about strategy and about what Hogwarts would be, and Atem read along with every book Harry read, following the words with that particular kind of attention that says this person is cross-referencing in real time. The magical traditions in this world are young, Atem said one evening, the third week of August, when Harry had finished the Shadow Arts history book and was lying on his back staring at the ceiling in the particular state of alert thoughtfulness that always followed heavy reading. They drew on older foundations. There are traces of Kemetic practice in their warding traditions, in their conception of magical oaths, in the theory underlying several of their object enchantments, but the connection is largely forgotten. Is that a problem? Not a problem. An opportunity. A pause. They understand magic as a technical skill, a set of procedures and formulas. This is useful and produces consistent results. It does not produce the deeper applications. Shadow magic, Harry said. Shadow magic requires something more than procedure, Atem said. It requires truth. You cannot shadow step toward a destination if some part of you is uncertain that you have the right to arrive there. You cannot call a shadow card if you do not truly understand what it means to call it. He paused. This is why it is rare. Most people have enough uncertainty about themselves to prevent it entirely. Harry was quiet for a moment. Outside his window, Privet Drive was exactly as dull and orderly and aggressively suburban as it always was, the lawns trimmed and the hedges squared and the lives behind the windows following the grooves they'd made for themselves. I'm 10, he said. I've got uncertainty about plenty of things. Yes, Atem said. But not about the things that matter. How do you know? Because you picked up a 3,000-year-old puzzle in the dark and solved it in one night, Atem said, with the calm authority of someone stating a fact. The Millennium puzzle was designed to be unsolvable by any soul that had not achieved a certain fundamental alignment with truth. Greed cannot solve it. Arrogance cannot solve it. Fear cannot solve it. Loneliness and pain, many people who've carried it into the dark were lonely and in pain, cannot solve it. He paused. You are lonely and in pain and you have been, I think, for much of your life. Yes, Harry said. No point denying it. But those things are not the center of you, Atem said. You hold them the way a soldier holds an injury, aware, compensated for, not in command. The center of you is something else. Curiosity. Fairness. A very clear sense of what matters. He paused. The puzzle responded to that. It has very good judgment about people. It always has. Harry stared at the ceiling. The streetlight outside was coming on, golden in the gathering dusk, and the room was going amber warm around him. He thought about what it would feel like, in 3 weeks, to step onto a platform at King's Cross and into a world that had been waiting for him, apparently, since the night he was born. He thought about it without anxiety, with something more like a particular, contained readiness, the state of a person who has been patient long enough and is finally about to be allowed to move. Atem, he said. Yes. Thank you. He paused. For being there. In the dark. A pause of a different quality, longer, with that same almost warmth he'd heard on Harry's birthday morning. You were there in mine, Atem said. 3,000 years of dark, and a 10-year-old boy with a torch and library books. I think the debt runs the other direction. Harry almost smiled. Almost. I suppose we'll just have to be even, then. Even, Atem said, and there was something in his voice that was complete, and settled, and perhaps closer to happy than an ancient pharaoh's soul had been in a very long time. The 1st of September came grey and cool, a London September morning with the smell of rain in it. Harry got himself to King's Cross by the Underground. Petunia gave him exact change for the fare and did not look at him when she said goodbye, which was entirely on brand, and Harry said thank you and meant it just enough to be civil and took his trolley with all his things on it and found platform 9 3/4 by a method that turned out to be somewhat more elegant than the nervous running at a wall technique the Weasley family ahead of him was using. He'd simply walked toward it while looking at something else, and the wall had let him through. Atem had described shadow stepping. Harry suspected what he'd done was an infant version of the same thing, moving with certainty toward a destination that others could not see. The Hogwarts Express was red and magnificent and extremely loud, and Harry stood on the platform and let the noise wash over him, families, owls, cats, trunks, steam, and breathed in the smell of it, which was magic and iron and London and elsewhere. "Ready?" Atem said. Harry picked up his trunk and walked toward the train. "I've been ready," he said, "for 11 years. Chapter 3, The Scarlet Engine. And the first game the compartment Harry found was empty, third from the front, on the left side of the train where the platform was still visible through the window. He liked being able to see exit points. He wasn't sure when he'd started thinking that way and suspected it was Atem's influence, slow and comfortable as water finding its level. He'd just gotten Ka's cage settled on the overhead rack and pulled the chest of shadow cards onto the seat beside him when the door slid open and a boy looked in, red-haired, freckled, with a smear of something on his nose that might have been ink or might have been something more alarming, and an expression of cheerful desperation that suggested every other compartment had already been claimed. "Anyone in here? Everywhere else is full, or there are second years in it who look like they want to practice hexes on someone." "Just me," Harry said. The boy came in with the momentum of someone who makes decisions quickly and doesn't generally regret them. He had a rat in his pocket. Harry could see its pink nose twitching above the fabric, and a wand that had clearly seen better days, wound with a bit of tape at the handle. He dropped into the seat across from Harry, shoved a trunk under the rack, and looked at Harry with the direct, evaluating friendliness of someone who has 6 siblings and has long since stopped being awkward around new people. "Ron," he said. "Ron Weasley." "Harry Potter," Harry said. Ron's eyes did the thing, the quick flick to the forehead, the recognizing widening, but he got himself together faster than most adults did, which Harry thought well of him for immediately. "Right," he said. "Yeah. Heard you were on the train. My mum told me. She ran into Hagrid at the station and he mentioned, sorry, I'm not," he stopped himself. "I was going to say something embarrassing about your scar, wasn't I?" "Probably," Harry said. "I've decided not to," Ron said. "Good," Harry said. There was a beat of silence that had no awkwardness in it whatsoever, and then Ron grinned, a wide, genuine grin that rearranged his whole face into something easy and warm, and Harry felt something in his chest do the small cracking thing it had done when Hagrid gave him the birthday cake. "I like him," he thought, internally. "Yes," Atem agreed, with something like approval. "His shadow is very clear. Not many shadows are that uncomplicated. It is rather remarkable. What house do you think you'll be in?" Ron asked, because apparently the question was a universal first-day opener, like asking someone's name and where they came from. "Don't know yet," Harry said honestly. "Whichever fits. Dad was Gryffindor. Mum was Gryffindor. All my brothers have been Gryffindor." Ron said this not with pride, exactly, but with the weary affection of someone who loves their family and also lives very much in the shadow of it. "Fred and George placed a bet that I'd be sorted into Slytherin just to see what Mum would do." "They're terrible." "Fond of them?" Harry asked. Ron considered. "Extremely," he said, with the tone of someone confessing to a character flaw. "Don't tell them." The train moved. The platform slid past the window and gave way to London rooftops and then to the outskirts and then to green, the wide rolling green of the countryside coming on like a curtain drawing back, and Harry watched it for a moment with the specific attention of someone who hasn't had much of this, open space, horizon, sky uninterrupted by rows of identical houses. Ron produced a paper bag of cauldron cakes from somewhere and offered one across with the unconscious generosity of someone raised in a home where things were shared before they were hoarded. Harry took it. It was warm and tasted like something between chocolate and spice and smelled faintly of magic. Have you had any of the Hogwarts sweets? The trolley comes around midway, Ron said. Chocolate frogs are good but they jump, so be ready. Every flavor beans are, honestly they're exactly what they say and some of the flavors are truly awful. He paused. My brother Charlie got earwax on his third try and didn't eat them again for a year. I'll prepare myself, Harry said. The chocolate frogs, Atem said, with what Harry privately identified as the tone of someone who finds something genuinely unusual, come with wizard cards. Historical figures. I have been reading about this in the books. The Dumbledore card is apparently very common. Harry filed this away. That's a good owl, Ron said, looking up at Ka, who was regarding him with the compressed expression of a creature that finds most things beneath comment but has not yet decided whether this particular person passes muster. She has strong opinions, Harry said. About what? So far, most things. Ron nodded seriously, as though this were entirely reasonable in an owl. Harry found this quality deeply endearing. The door slid open again an hour into the journey, and this time it was a girl, bushy brown hair, quick brown eyes, a prefect's alertness in the way she held herself even though she was just a first year, like authority was something she was already rehearsing. She looked around the compartment with the assessing efficiency of someone who has been looking for something specific. Have either of you seen a toad? A boy named Neville's lost one. It got away when the train started moving and he's been looking for 20 minutes. No toad, Harry said. But there's a gap between the rack and the wall on the left side. Things slide in there. Did he try the overhead? She blinked. I'll tell him. She didn't leave. She looked at Harry with those bright, cataloging eyes. I'm Hermione Granger. Harry Potter. The cataloging sharpened, ran up to the forehead and back down, and then something interesting happened. Rather than the usual awestruck pause or the careful management of reaction that Harry had been getting from people who recognized his name, Hermione's eyes went more interested than awed, like she'd found something in a book that didn't match the index entry. You're not what I expected, she said. What did you expect? Harry asked. I read quite a lot about you before coming, she said, with complete frankness, and none of the sources agree, which I've found suspicious. They all say you're remarkable, but they differ substantially on what kind of remarkable. She looked at him steadily. You seem very calm for someone who's apparently being treated as, well, significant. Significance has never made me calm or not calm, Harry said. Other things do that. She considered this. Her eyes dropped briefly to his chest, to the outline of the puzzle under his shirt, which was barely visible but apparently enough, and back up to his face. What is that? A family piece, Harry said. He paused. You can sit down if you'd like. She sat down, next to Ron, who was looking between them with the expression of someone watching a conversation operate in a frequency slightly above his range but who is thoroughly entertained by it regardless. Hermione Granger, Atem said, in Harry's thoughts, with the careful, interested tone of someone filing detailed notes. Her shadow has a very specific quality, like someone who has so much light in them that the shadow has to go deep to compensate. That is extremely rare. It means she has great potential in areas she has not yet discovered. Harry looked at Hermione and felt a version of the same recognition he'd felt with Ron, but different in character. Ron's was warmth and ease, Hermione's was sharpness and depth, and together in the compartment with him they made something that felt like the beginning of a proper set. What have you been reading? Ron asked Hermione, with the resignation of someone who expects the answer to be a lot and has already accepted this. Everything, she said, which confirmed it. Hogwarts, a history most thoroughly. Also the standard spell books. I've been practicing some of the first-year spells. I've had some success with Lumos and I nearly got the levitation charm right, though the wrist movement is finicky. She paused and looked at Harry. Have you practiced? Not spells, Harry said. I've been reading theory. She looked genuinely interested. What kind of theory? History of magical traditions. Shadow arts. Some comparative analysis of different magical systems. He paused. The relationship between intent and effect in advanced casting. Hermione's eyes had gone bright in the way eyes go bright when someone who loves ideas encounters someone else who is taking ideas seriously. There's a chapter in the Art of Magical Theory, it's not on the first-year list, have you read it? About the role of belief in wand work. The hypothesis is that the formula matters less than most practitioners think and intent matters more. That matches what I've been reading, Harry said. The older traditions were almost entirely intent-based. The formula came later, as a way of making it teachable. Yes. Exactly. She leaned forward. Although I think formula does have its value, consistency, reproducibility, especially for less experienced, sure, Harry agreed. But it's a shortcut. Not the thing itself. Ron was eating a cauldron cake and watching them with the serene expression of a person who has decided that what is happening in front of him is good, even if he can't fully follow it. The trolley came. Harry bought chocolate frogs, several cauldron cakes, and a small bag of Bertie Bott's every flavor beans because he was genuinely curious. He ate a grass-flavored bean, determined that grass was exactly as unpleasant as expected, and handed the bag to Ron. He opened a chocolate frog, which immediately lived up to its name and made a creditable attempt at reaching the window before Harry caught it one-handed without looking up from the card inside. The card was Albus Dumbledore. Harry looked at it for a moment. The tiny painted figure waved at him from the card with an expression of grandfatherly warmth. The back listed his accomplishments: defeat of Grindelwald, Order of Merlin, current position as headmaster of Hogwarts, various titles and honors. He knows about you, Atem said. Not just about Harry Potter the symbol. He has been watching you specifically. The way Ragnarok reacted at Gringotts, whoever authorized that secondary vault review had significant standing in the institution. Dumbledore's name has that kind of weight. Harry turned the card over again. The tiny Dumbledore was now pretending to read a tiny book and occasionally glancing up as if to check whether Harry was still looking. He tucked it into his pocket, card side facing his chest, and said nothing. The afternoon was well along when the compartment doors slid open a third time, and this time Harry felt it before it happened, a slight shift in the quality of the air, a tightening, the way Atem's presence at the edge of his thoughts went from background warmth to something more alert. Not alarm. Readiness. Malfoy stood in the doorway with two large boys at his back who had the look of permanent, paid-for company. He'd changed into his robes, fresh, pressed, expensive, and carried himself with the particular authority of someone who has been told, all his life, that he owns every room he walks into. He looked at Harry. His eyes did a quick accounting of the compartment: Harry, Ron, Hermione, and the assessment was visibly unflattering for at least two of them. Still haven't made better choices, I see, he said, directing this at Harry with the easy confidence of someone who has never been contradicted to his face. I've made exactly the choices I intended, Harry said. Malfoy's jaw tightened slightly. In Madame Malkin's, Harry had denied him the usual social script, and Malfoy had been carrying that unfulfilled exchange around for the entire day, Harry suspected. You're Harry Potter, Malfoy said, and there was the name, dropped like a card onto the table, the high card, the one that was supposed to end the bidding. You could be associating with people who matter. I am, Harry said simply. Ron made a small, surprised sound. Hermione pressed her lips together in the way of someone suppressing a smile. Malfoy looked between them, and Harry could see him recalculating, could see, behind the practiced aristocratic surface, a boy who had never quite had to think this hard in what should have been a simple social transaction. A Weasley, he said, with the specific disdain of someone whose family has very particular opinions about other families. And who are you, to Hermione, dismissively. Hermione Granger, she said, with a composure that was entirely authentic, she wasn't performing calm, she was calm, because Malfoy's opinion had no particular relevance to any of her actual concerns. Muggleborn, Malfoy said, after a beat. Yes, Hermione said. Malfoy let the pause do his work for him, which was the specific cowardice of people who've learned to imply rather than say. Harry watched this with a clarity that was beginning to collect itself into something more pointed. Would you like to play a game? Harry said. Everyone in the compartment went slightly still. Malfoy blinked. What? A game, Harry said. He reached beside him and opened the cedar chest, and took out 3 shadow cards, setting them face down on the seat in a row. It's simple. You pick one of these cards. I pick one. Whoever's is stronger wins. If I win, you spend the rest of this train journey elsewhere. He paused. If you win, I'll concede that your point about company was valid. Malfoy stared at him. Then at the cards. They were face down, deep blue-black backs with a pattern that caught the light in a way normal card backs didn't. That's ridiculous, he said. It's a fair game, Harry said. You've got an equal chance. He can't refuse, Atem said quietly. He's established himself as someone who doesn't back down, in front of his companions. Refusing looks worse than losing. Malfoy stepped into the compartment, ignoring his 2 associates, who exchanged a glance and stayed near the door. He looked at the 3 cards on the seat. Fine, he said, with the dismissive confidence of someone who thinks they can't lose something they don't yet know the stakes of. This one. He reached for the left card. Touch it and the choice is made, Harry said. Malfoy's fingers hovered. He looked at Harry's face, looking for something, looking for a tell, Harry thought, the twitch that betrays a bluff, and found the same calm, open, direct attentiveness that didn't tell him anything. He touched the left card. Then he looked at Harry. Well? What is it? Harry reached forward and turned Malfoy's card over. The image on it moved. It was a creature, low to the ground, long-bodied, with scales that caught the light in cold blues and greens, and eyes that tracked upward at Malfoy as the card turned over. A serpentine shadow, one of the lesser cards in the set, Harry had learned over the summer. Atem's quiet voice in his mind had catalogued the chest over several evenings, patient and precise as a librarian in the archive of himself. Malfoy stared at it. Whatever he'd expected, it wasn't a card that was looking at him. My turn, Harry said, and turned over the middle card. The figure on it was vast. Even constrained to the card's surface, it communicated enormity, a warrior shape of pure shadow, carrying weapons that weren't quite swords and weren't quite light, with a presence that seemed to push slightly against the boundaries of the card itself. The Dark Paladin of Shadow. The second most powerful card in the chest. Harry had chosen it while taking out the 3 cards, by touch, in the way he'd been practicing all summer. Shadow sense, Atem called it, the ability to feel the truth of objects and people through their shadow resonance. It was getting sharper every week. The card's figure seemed to look across at Malfoy's serpentine, and the serpentine dropped its head. Malfoy said nothing for a moment. His jaw was set, but something in his eyes had shifted, not frightened, exactly, but recalibrated, the way someone recalibrates when they realize a game has different rules than they thought. He looked at Harry. Where did you get those? He said. Family vault, Harry said. A beat of silence. Malfoy looked at the Dark Paladin card, still looking back at him, unblinking, and then he picked up his chosen card, tucked it into his pocket with the practiced smoothness of someone who doesn't want anyone to see that they're keeping it, and straightened his robes. Until Hogwarts, then, he said, and it wasn't quite defeat and wasn't quite a threat. It was the acknowledgement of someone who has begun a game that is more interesting than he expected and doesn't yet know if he should be alarmed or excited. Until Hogwarts, Harry said pleasantly. Malfoy left. His associates followed. The door slid shut. Ron let out a long breath. What, he said, was that? A game, Harry said, picking up the Dark Paladin card and the remaining unchosen one and replacing them in the chest. Those cards, Hermione said, and her voice had the quality of someone operating just above their available information and not enjoying the feeling. What are they? Old magic, Harry said. Very old. Egyptian in origin, technically. He looked at her. I can explain more when I understand more myself. There's a lot of it I'm still figuring out. This apparently satisfied her, because it was honest, and Hermione Granger was someone who took honest uncertainty far more readily than confident vagueness. She nodded. The creature on Malfoy's card, she said. Did it actually look at him? Yes. The magic is active, she said. Not a question. Extremely, Harry said. Ron was looking at the chest with the expression of someone who has just realized that their new friend is a great deal more interesting than the situation initially suggested and is settling in for the long run of it. Can I see one? He said. Harry opened the chest. Pick one, he said. Ron reached in carefully, with more care than Malfoy had used by a significant degree, and drew one out. He turned it over. The image on it was a winged creature, vast, serpentine, with scales of deep gold and eyes like amber stars, and a presence that even through the card's dimensions communicated something ancient and enormous and, somehow, benevolent. It looked at Ron with an attention that was gentle. Ron went very still. What is this one? He breathed. The guardian of the solar throne, Atem said softly, and his voice had something reverent in it. In my era, this creature was associated with the protection of pharaohs and of those in the pharaoh's family. It appears only when it chooses to be found. A pause. I have not seen it take to someone that quickly in 3,000 years. That one likes you, Harry said. Ron looked up at him. Really? Really, Harry said, and smiled, actually smiled, not the small, contained almost smiles he usually managed, but something genuine and warm that made Ron blink slightly, as if the smile changed Harry's face enough to be a different thing entirely. You can hold on to it if you want. Ron turned the card over in his hands with a reverence that he was clearly slightly embarrassed by and completely unable to suppress. The golden creature on the face followed his movements like a cat watching something it has decided to trust. Hermione was looking at Harry with those quick, bright eyes. You're going to be very unusual at Hogwarts, aren't you? She said. Probably, Harry said. Good, she said, with complete sincerity. The sky outside the train had gone deep blue, the good blue of late northern summer evening, and the countryside was rolling dark hills and the occasional light of a distant farm, and the three of them ate chocolate frogs and argued companionably about magical theory, and Atem sat in the back of Harry's thoughts like a lamp in a good room, warm and present and, Harry thought, perhaps finally somewhere that felt like belonging. It was Hermione who noticed when the windows went dark in a different way, not evening dark but close dark, the dark of something near the glass. What is that? She said. Harry had already felt it, the way you feel a room temperature drop before you can name the cause. Not cold exactly, emptier than cold. A draining quality, like light being removed from the space rather than darkness added to it. Ka in her cage pressed herself to the back in a silent, feather-compressed bundle of alarm. The rat in Ron's pocket squeaked. Something on the roof. Ron said uncertainly. The train lurched slightly. The lights flickered and went out. And then the door at the end of the carriage opened, and Harry felt the thing's shadow before he saw the thing itself, a vast, hollow negative space in the world's fabric, the place where something should be and wasn't, and from the doorway, because the door between cars was open, he saw the shape enter the carriage. Tall. Dark. Moving with the specific wrongness of something that has no bones under its covering. The cloak moved in a wind that wasn't there, and the face below the hood was, not there. There was nothing there. Just cold, and the cold had a sound, like a high, thin tone played just below hearing, and Harry's friends were going still around him in the specific way of bodies responding to profound danger before the mind has processed it. Ron went chalk white. Hermione made a small, involuntary sound. Harry looked at the Dementor. Shadow Feeder, Atem said, and his voice was very even, with a focused quality beneath it like a blade being drawn slowly. It feeds on the positive emotional resonance in shadow, on what the living store in themselves. Joy. Hope. Safety. It takes these. A pause. In my time, there were similar entities. They were called shadow eaters. They were exorcised from Duat by the Pharaoh's court. The Dementor moved toward them. Harry could feel it working already, not on him, not properly, because whatever the puzzle had done to his shadow made it something the Dementor couldn't get purchase on easily, but he could feel it trying, and he could feel what it was doing to Ron on his left, who had gone somewhere else behind his eyes, and Hermione, who was gripping the seat arm with whitened knuckles. Harry stood up. He wasn't thinking about it. He was in the aisle of the train car, 3 feet from the thing, and he was standing very straight, and he reached up and pulled the Millennium puzzle out from under his shirt by its cord, and it swung free, and the eye on the front face blazed amber in the dark car. The Dementor stopped. Shadow fed shadow. Harry reached into the thing that Atem had been teaching him all summer, not performing it, not trying it, doing it with the flat certainty of someone who has practiced until the body knows the path before the mind does, and he pushed outward with his shadow, not in anger, not in fear, in the specific, clear language of ownership. This space. These people. Mine. Not possessively. Protectively. The way you stand between something precious and something that wants to take it. The Dementor made a sound that wasn't a sound, more like a pressure reversal, a sudden influx of air to fill a space. It retreated 2 steps. The amber eye of the puzzle burned steadily, and the shadow Harry had extended sat in the air of the car like a second presence, immense, unhurried, and very old. The Dementor left. The lights came back. The warmth came back. Ron sagged against the seat like something had been holding him up and stopped. Hermione took 3 precise, controlled breaths. Harry sat back down. He tucked the puzzle back under his shirt, and his hands were steady. "What," Ron said, in a voice that was remarkably level for someone who'd just been through that, "did you just do?" "Convinced it to leave," Harry said. "That is not a normal thing that people can do," Ron said. "No," Harry agreed. "What you pushed out," Hermione said, and her voice was almost entirely steady, only the faintest shake at the edge of it, that felt very old. "It wasn't a spell." "What was it?" "Shadow magic," Harry said. He looked at her, because she deserved a straight answer and he could see she would accept one. "I'll explain more when I can." "But you're safe." She looked at him for a long moment. The slight shake was gone. Something in her expression settled, not satisfied, not fully, she clearly had several hundred follow-up questions, but trusting, which was something more important than satisfied. "Okay," she said. Ron produced a crumpled chocolate bar from his coat pocket, "emergency rations," he explained, because his mom had told him chocolate helped after Dementors, which Harry filed away as both useful and a testament to the practical wisdom of women who'd raised multiple children in proximity to the magical world. Harry took a piece. It helped, he found, not because he'd been badly affected, but because the warmth of it was pleasant and concrete and present in a way that was useful after proximity to something that fundamentally attacked presence. The train ran on into the dark, and the stars came out over Scotland, and when Hermione tried to ask about the shadow cards again, Harry told her the full version of the summer, minus Atem, because Atem was his, in the way some things are yours before you understand the grammar of possession. And she listened with her knees pulled up to her chin and her eyes gone wide and busy with the effort of incorporating new information into existing frameworks. Ron listened too, with the straightforward attention of someone who has decided that the facts are the facts and the appropriate response is just to understand them rather than debate them. This was, Harry was finding, one of Ron's greatest qualities, not the absence of opinion, he had plenty of those, but the absence of ego about being surprised. "Egypt," Hermione said, when Harry finished. "The vault was specifically Egyptian in its wording?" "Yes." "And the cards?" Harry glanced down at the chest. "The tradition that made them is called Shadow Realm magic, in the documents I found." It's older than European wizardry by a significant margin. And you can use it, she said. Naturally. Without training. Some of it, Harry said. I have guidance, he added, which was as close to the truth as he was prepared to go on a train on the first day of knowing someone. But it's also just, it seems to fit me. The way some wands fit their wizard better than others. Some magic fits better. Hermione was quiet for a moment. Then, I want to read everything you've read. You can borrow the books, Harry said. Her expression did something that was adjacent to radiant. Right, Ron said, so we've got shadow Egyptian magic, cards with creatures that actually look at you, Harry apparently scaring Dementors off by, glowing at them. And we haven't even gotten to the school yet. He picked up another chocolate frog. This is going to be a very interesting year. Yes, Harry said. Understatement, Atem said, dryly, and Harry almost laughed. The mountains of Scotland came up dark against the darker sky, and then there were boats, tiny, self-propelled boats across the Black Lake with the castle on the far shore, towers and battlements and lit windows golden in the night, and Harry sat in his boat with Ron and Hermione and looked at Hogwarts for the first time, and felt, somewhere deep in his chest, something that was not quite any emotion he had a name for. Home, he thought, before he could stop himself. Not yet, Atem said gently. But possibly. The entrance hall was enormous and warm and smelled of candles and old stone, and Professor McGonagall met them in it with the crisp authority of someone who has shepherded a great many frightened first years and lost patience for anyone who makes the process more difficult than it needs to be. She was sharp-eyed, precise, and Harry respected her immediately and completely. She explained the sorting. Harry listened. He was aware, distantly, of the murmuring of the other first years around him, the nerves, the speculation about the process, Neville Longbottom, who had found his toad, eventually, with Harry's suggestion proving correct, looking quietly ill with anxiety. Harry felt a familiar, specific compassion for that expression, the look of someone who has been waiting for something to go wrong and is trying to prepare for it while hoping they're wrong. He didn't feel anxious. He wasn't performing calm. It was simply that the question of where the hat would put him felt less important than the questions of what the hat was and how it worked, which were considerably more interesting. It is alive, Atem said, when the hat was brought out. Or close to it. Some form of bound consciousness. The enchantment is sophisticated, old for European magic, perhaps 600 years. Can it see thoughts? It can see shadow, Atem said. Everyone's shadow is a history of who they have been and a possibility map of who they might be. A hat like this reads possibility maps. What does mine look like? A pause of the particular quality that meant Atem was amused. Very large, he said. And very unusual. Possibly the hat will be surprised. The hat sang its song, which Harry found genuinely entertaining as a concept, a sorting hat that had developed aesthetic ambitions over 6 centuries, and then McGonagall read names from the roll and the first years went up, one by one, and were sorted into houses with the varying speed and drama that the hat apparently saw fit to give each sorting. Potter, Harry. The hall went quiet the way rooms go quiet when something they have been expecting has finally arrived. Harry felt the attention of several hundred people turn to him like a physical pressure, not hostile, not all of it, but immense, and layered, and weighted with the specific complexity of people who have been told a story and are now encountering the actual person in the story and finding them different from the story. Harry walked to the stool. He sat down. McGonagall placed the hat on his head. And the hat, which had been doing this for a very long time and was accustomed to the full range of human complexity, went completely silent in his head for 3 full seconds. Well, it said. And that was all, for another 2 seconds. You are not what I expected, it said finally, with the specific tone of a scholar encountering a primary source that contradicts every reference they've previously consulted. I've been told, Harry said. There are 2 of you. More or less. The hat was quiet again. Harry was aware, distantly, of the hall's silence, people not whispering, which was unusual, which meant they could tell something was happening. The older one, the hat said carefully, as if approaching something that might bite, is extraordinarily ancient. I have been sorting students for 608 years, and I have never encountered a shadow of this age sharing space with a student. He doesn't require sorting, Harry said. Just me. Yes, but he is not irrelevant to the question. The hat appeared to be thinking with great purpose. You, Harry Potter, have capacity for everything I sort for. Courage, deeply rooted, not performative. Intelligence, far beyond most students I encounter, and unusual in its character, more instinctive than academic, which is interesting. Loyalty, not reflexive but chosen, which is rarer and more valuable. Ambition, it paused. Ambition of a very specific kind. You don't want power. You want understanding. The difference is important. And? Harry said. The older presence, the hat said, and now it had a tone of something like awe, carefully managed, is what makes this unusual. He is a pharaoh. His shadow is built entirely around the concept of righteous leadership, authority that serves rather than commands. That kind of shadow influence shapes the soul it shares space with. A pause. You are not yet what he is. But you are the beginning of it. And the house that serves the beginning of a thing like that, is Gryffindor. The last word exploded outward from private thought into the full public hall, and the Gryffindor table erupted, loud, genuine, the particular Gryffindor enthusiasm that was warm and physical and uncalculating, and Harry removed the hat and handed it back to McGonagall and walked to the table. Ron was sorted Gryffindor 6 names later and threw himself into the seat next to Harry with the specific relief of someone who has been given an answer to a question they cared about more than they admitted. Hermione was Gryffindor 3 names after that and sat on Harry's other side with composed pleasure and the air of someone who had done their research and arrived at the expected outcome. Harry looked down the table at his house, at the red and gold and the warm chaos of it, the portraits on the walls watching the new students arrive, the enchanted ceiling showing the stars outside, and felt the almost home feeling again, stronger this time. What do you think? He asked Atem. I think, Atem said, with something that might have been the oldest and most certain kind of contentment, that you have your people. The food arrived all at once, filling plates that had been empty a moment before, and the great hall exploded back into noise, 100 conversations and the clatter of cutlery and Ron's commentary on every dish within reach, and at the high table, above the hall, Harry felt eyes on him. He looked up. Dumbledore was looking at him with those particular eyes, half-moon glasses and deep blue, the blue of something that has been looking at long distances for a very long time. His expression was warm, and grandfatherly, and entirely open. Harry looked back at him with the same calm, direct attention he'd given to Malfoy and Ollivander and the Dementor, and the tiniest thing, barely a thing at all, really, shifted in Dumbledore's expression. A reappraisal. Harry looked away first, because the food was there and he was hungry, and Atem had once told him that in a contest of attention, the person who looks away when they choose to is always in the stronger position. Along the table to Harry's left, in the position of someone who had chosen to be observable while trying to appear to be minding his own business, the defense against the dark arts teacher, Professor Quirrell, the purple turban, the slight stutter, the scent of garlic that was excessive even from several seats away, was not eating. He was watching Harry. And the part of Atem that lived at the bottom of Harry's shadow went very, very still. Harry, Atem said, quietly, with a precision in his voice like a blade being pressed flat and true against a whetstone. I know, Harry said. The turban. Yes. There is something behind it, Atem said. Something that is not alive in the way of the living, but is not dead in the way of the dead. It exists in the space between. A pause. I have felt something like it before. Once. In the last days of my kingdom, when the enemies of the Shadow Realm sent emissaries. His voice was careful and entirely certain. It is very dark, and it is very old, and it knows you are here. Harry took a bite of roast chicken. Then we'll know each other properly soon enough, he said, and let the evening swallow the thought, the warmth of it, the torchlight, the new table and the new faces, and sat between his people and said nothing of what he'd seen. There would be time. Chapter 4, Shadows in the Ceiling. The first thing Harry learned about Hogwarts was that it was alive. Not metaphorically. Not in the warm, institutional sense of a place so old it had accumulated personality the way old furniture accumulates scratches. Actually, functionally alive, the staircases moved with intent, the portraits carried on independent existences behind their painted surfaces, and the castle's shadow ran deep and complex in a way that Harry felt from the moment he stepped through the doors, a vast subterranean hum beneath his feet like standing on a sleeping animal's back. Old, Atem said, the first morning, when Harry stood in the corridor outside Gryffindor Tower and felt the castle with his eyes closed. Very old. And layered, there are at least 4 distinct periods of magical architecture here, built on top of each other. Some of the lowest foundations are close to comedic in their energy signature. Not deliberately, but whoever built this place was drawing on traditions older than they probably understood. Harry opened his eyes and went to breakfast. The Great Hall in the mornings had a completely different character from the Great Hall at the feast, quieter, messier, the enchanted ceiling grey with early cloud and the light coming in flat and northern. Students arrived in stages, trailing sleep, and the post-owls came in a rush at 7:30, 100 birds dropping from the ceiling with letters and parcels, and Harry watched them and ate toast and felt Hogwarts breathing around him. Ka landed on his shoulder with a copy of a history of magic he'd asked her to retrieve from his room. She'd figured out the route herself, which he'd expected, and the look she gave the other owls was magnificently disdainful. She knows she's better than them, Ron said, not looking up from a plate of eggs. She's correct about it, Harry said. That's the difference. Ron considered this and nodded. Fair. Hermione arrived at 7:40 with her timetable already annotated and her bag organized to a degree that suggested she'd been at it since 6. She sat down, poured herself tea, and said without preamble, "We have potions with the Slytherins." I asked a 4th year, apparently Snape is. She paused, choosing her word. Difficult. In what direction? Harry asked. He has favorites, she said, which was its own complete answer. Ron made a sound that was entirely resigned. Dad says he's been at Hogwarts forever and everyone knows he wanted the defense against the dark arts job. Mum says he was a Death Eater. He paused. She said it quietly, which means she's not sure it's fair to say. Then we'll see for ourselves, Harry said. He said it as simply as that, which was the way he said most things, not dismissively, just with the underlying conviction that the best information about a person is the information they give you directly, and that other people's assessments, however well-intentioned, are someone else's shadow reading someone else's shadow, which introduces compounding error. That is a very elegant way of thinking about epistemology, Atem said. I read it in one of your books. I do not have books. The ones from my vault that I think were your books. A pause. That is possible, Atem said, with the particular tone of someone who is pleased and doesn't want to make too much of it. The first classes were a revelation. Not because Harry hadn't expected magic, he'd spent a summer reading about it with the thoroughness of someone who intends to understand a place before arriving in it, but because reading about magic and doing magic were related activities separated by an experiential gap roughly the size of the Atlantic. Charms was first, and Professor Flitwick, tiny, precise, genuinely enthusiastic in the way of someone who has taught the same subject for decades and still finds it interesting, walked them through the theory of Wingardium Leviosa with a rigor that Harry found he could contextualize against everything Atem had taught him about the relationship between intent and formula. When he cast it, the feather rose. That was expected. What wasn't expected was the way it rose, not the light, slightly uncertain levitation that most of the other first years produced, but with a clean steadiness, a confidence in the air, as if the feather had decided it wanted to be up and Harry had simply confirmed the decision. Flitwick looked at it for a moment. Then at Harry. Then back at the feather. Very good, he said, and there was something carefully neutral in his voice, the tone of someone withholding a stronger reaction. Very clean. Most students your age have a slight wobble, the magic is reaching the right intention but with a slight uncertainty in the channel. You have very little wobble, Mr. Potter.
Thank you, Professor, Harry said.
Hermione's feather rose too, with excellent technique and precise wand work. She looked at Harry's and then at hers and then back at Harry's with a competitive gleam that she immediately managed into something more collaborative. Your wrist movement was different, she said, after class.
Less wrist, Harry said.
More intention. The formula does the same work either way, but if the intention is clear enough, the formula needs less physical emphasis to work. She wrote this down. He found this endearing. Transfiguration was with McGonagall, and McGonagall was exactly what she'd seemed at the sorting, precise, high standard, and deeply fair in a way that demanded you be the same. She turned her desk into a pig and back before calling the class to attention, and Harry watched the transformation with the focused attention of someone noting every detail of a technique, and when she caught his eyes she held them for a moment with an expression that was not quite a challenge and not quite a welcome but contained elements of both. The matchstick-to-needle exercise went smoothly for Harry. Less smoothly for Ron, who produced something that was mostly needle but retained a sullen wooden quality, and less smoothly for several others. Hermione's was perfect. Neville Longbottom, who sat 2 rows back and had the air of someone bracing for disaster, produced a needle that was excellent, was so surprised by this that he knocked it off his desk, and then spent 5 minutes looking for it under his chair with the expression of someone who expects their luck to run out momentarily. Harry picked it up for him, it had rolled under Harry's chair, and handed it back. Neville looked at him with the wariness of someone who has been burned by kindness before.
Thanks, he said.
Good transfiguration, Harry said. Your intentions are very clear. That's the hardest part. Neville blinked. Everyone says I'm rubbish at magic. Everyone says a lot of things, Harry said simply, and turned back to his desk. That was kind, Atem said. It was true, Harry said. Yes, Atem said. Those two things are not always the same, which is what makes it kind. Then came potions. The dungeons were cold in the specific way of deep stone, the kind of cold that summer can't reach, that exists independent of surface weather, and the potions classroom had the smell of 100 years of complex chemistry and the visual texture of a serious professional's workspace, shelves of ingredients in careful order, cauldrons of varying sizes stacked on one side, Snape's desk at the front with its single jar of something unidentifiable and its view of every row. Snape arrived in the way of people who timed their entrances, just after the last student sat down, his robes settling around him with the theatrical weight of someone accustomed to being the most interesting thing in a room. Harry looked at him with the same attentiveness he gave everything. Snape was thin and dark and moved with precision, and his shadow, Harry was developing a sensitivity to these that was getting sharper by the day, was complicated. Layered and barbed and carrying the specific quality of old wounds that hadn't properly healed, scar tissue over scar tissue, and underneath it all something genuine and fierce that had long since learned to present itself as contempt because contempt was safer. Difficult man, Atem said quietly. Damaged one, Harry said. Both, Atem agreed. Snape called the roll. When he reached Harry, he stopped. Harry Potter, he said, and the name had a very specific weight in his mouth, studied, deliberate. Our new celebrity. Harry looked at him steadily. Professor. Let's see if you're as famous for your magical knowledge. Snape's dark eyes were direct and sharp. Tell me, Potter, what would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood? The potions classroom stilled in the specific way of people who sense that something is being set up. Ron sent Harry a sideways glance of concern. Hermione's hand went up automatically beside Harry, and Harry saw Snape's eyes flicker to it with a dismissiveness that was itself an answer. Harry said, the draught of living death. One of the most powerful sleeping potions known. The name is something of a misnomer, it doesn't cause death, it causes a state indistinguishable from it to most diagnostic charms. He paused. The asphodel and wormwood are both associated with grief in wizarding symbolism. Some potions historians think the name is a reference to that, rather than the effect. Snape was very still for exactly 2 seconds. Then, where would you look if I told you to find me a bezoar? The stomach of a goat. It's an antidote to most poisons, historically. Modern potion science has developed more targeted antidotes for specific toxins, but a bezoar is still considered reliable general-purpose emergency treatment. Harry paused. It's easier to ask what it won't work against than what it will. A longer pause. Snape's expression hadn't changed, it was still the controlled, slightly disdainful surface of someone who has long since decided not to let his face announce his internal state, but something behind his eyes had shifted slightly. What is the difference between monkshood and wolfsbane, he said, and there was now a very specific quality to the questions, the way a swordsman shifts their grip when they realize they're fencing with someone better than expected. Nothing, Harry said. They're the same plant. Also called aconite. Extremely toxic, used in potions in very controlled concentrations, wolfsbane potion, which manages lycanthropy, is the most famous application, though the potion involves rather complex chemistry that modifies the toxicity. He looked at Snape directly. Are there more questions? The class was entirely silent. In the front row, Malfoy was wearing an expression that was entirely unreadable, which was itself interesting. Snape looked at Harry for a moment that was 1 second longer than was comfortable. Then, evidently someone did their reading, he said, and the dismissal was practiced enough that most people in the room took it as a put-down. Harry took it as what it actually was, the move of someone who needs to find a different angle. I did, Harry said pleasantly. The lesson proceeded. Harry brewed his potion, a simple softening solution, first-year standard, with the focused attention he gave to everything, following Atem's guidance where Atem had relevant knowledge and his own instincts where he didn't. The result was correct. Not spectacular, not flashy, simply exactly what it was supposed to be, and he cleaned his workspace without being told. Snape moved through the class with the precise, critical attention of someone who has made a decades-long study of finding fault, and Harry watched him and understood something. Snape was not cruel. He was exacting and he was guarded, and his attention was calibrated to his pre-existing assessments of students, which meant some students got rigorous teaching and some got active discouragement. But cruelty would have been easier to dismiss. This was something more human and more complicated. When Snape passed Harry's cauldron and looked at it without comment, not praised, not criticized, simply noted, Harry understood this as Snape's highest available score, and was quietly satisfied. Hermione's was also correct, and Snape said so, 2 words, precise, and moved on. She looked at Harry and they shared a small, mutual understanding. Ron's had a slight consistency issue. Snape noted this in the tone of someone expecting it, which was, Harry thought, the actual cruelty, the voice that says I already knew this to a student who was trying. He said nothing, but filed the moment. The evenings in Gryffindor Tower were warm and chaotic, all reds and golds, the armchairs deep, the fire always going, the noise of older students and the particular social weather of a house that did everything loudly. Harry liked it in the way you like a thing that is very different from what you have been used to, with a gratitude that sometimes felt like vertigo. He sat in the corner of the common room with his books and Hermione's additional questions and Ron's occasional companionable silence when Ron wasn't playing chess. He was very good at chess, with the particular strategic instinct of someone who has been playing since they could see over the board. His chess shadow is interesting, Atem said one evening, watching Ron work through a game against a third year who had made the mistake of looking confident. He plays from the other side of the board. He sets his pieces up not to win but to make his opponent lose, entirely different architecture of strategy. Is that good? It is excellent, Atem said. Most people think offense and defense are the same direction of motion. He understands they are not. You should play, Harry told Ron, one evening, meaning the older students. Ron looked up from his board. I do play. Play the 5th years, Harry said. The ones who think they're good. Ron looked at the group of 5th years near the window, a boy named James Not Potter who had once commented that first-year chess was primary school chess and had not intended to be overheard, but had been. Ron looked back at Harry. A grin spread across his face with the slow inevitability of a sunrise. "Yeah," he said. "I'll do that." He won in 11 moves. The fifth year demanded a rematch. Ron won the rematch in 9. The Quidditch team tryouts happened on a Tuesday afternoon, and Harry went because Hermione told him he should. She'd read the statistics on Gryffindor's recent Quidditch performance and believed the team needed strengthening at Seeker with a frankness that was beautiful in its directness, and because Harry was genuinely curious about the sport in a low-stakes, observational way. The pitch was large and green and the sky was the specific grey of Scottish October, and Oliver Wood, the Gryffindor captain, a sixth year with the energy of someone for whom Quidditch was the organizing principle of the entire universe, had set up a simple skills demonstration. Harry sat on a school broom, which was old and had a slight drift to the left, and felt the air around him in the way Atem had been teaching him to feel spaces, as a medium with texture and current and depth, not as empty space you moved through but as something you moved with. "The drift," Atem said, after the first lap, "is in the bristles. The bind on the right side is slightly tighter. Compensate counterclockwise at the handle." Harry did. The broom smoothed out. He caught the snitch, a small, winged golden blur that would have released with the air of someone expecting it to take at least 20 minutes, in 4 minutes and 30 seconds, from a standing position, with one hand. Wood stared at him. "That was," Wood said. "The snitch has a pattern," Harry said, landing. "It uses the seeker's attention as an avoidance guide. If you want it to go a direction, look somewhere else." He handed it to Wood. "You can have Flint look for it. Slytherin Seeker is good but he's obvious about where he's looking." Wood stared at him for a long moment, the way people look when they're revising several assumptions simultaneously. "First year," he said. "Can't play, the rules don't normally." "McGonagall has waived the first-year rule before," Harry said. He paused. "Ask her." McGonagall waived the rule. She told Wood, via message, that she had full confidence in his judgment, which Harry translated accurately as, "I watched from the stands and the answer is yes, but I want you to feel responsible for it." Atem found Quidditch fascinating in the way of someone who had spent 3 millennia unable to encounter it and now had access to a full analysis of competitive strategy. He spent 2 days working through the dynamics of seeker play versus chaser play versus keeper play with the methodical enthusiasm of a general studying new terrain, and periodically updated Harry with observations about optimal positioning that Harry was fairly sure had never been articulated quite that way before. "It is essentially a 2-game hybrid," Atem said, the evening after the tryout. "You have the Quaffle game, which is a territory and points game, low scores, high skill, and runs on its own logic. And then you have the Snitch game, which supersedes the Quaffle game and ends it. The interesting tactical question is whether a significant Quaffle lead ever justifies releasing the Seeker from Snitch pursuit to help with scoring, essentially, whether the 2 games can ever be played simultaneously." "Has anyone done that?" Harry asked. "Not that I have read," Atem said. "Which suggests either no one has thought of it, or everyone who has thought of it has been unable to execute it at the required level." A pause. "You could execute it." Harry filed this away for later. It was during the second week that things became more interesting. Harry had been watching Quirrell since the sorting, not obviously, not in the way that would attract notice, in the way you watch something from your peripheral vision because looking at it directly might change its behavior. The thing behind the turban was aware of Harry, he was certain of it, because Atem was certain of it, and Atem's certainty came from a recognition that ran deeper than Harry's own experience. "It tests the edges of your shadow," Atem said one morning in defense against the dark arts, which was, in practical terms, the most obvious opportunity to watch Quirrell at close range. "Not aggressively. Exploratively. The way a general sends scouts rather than troops. It's trying to understand what I am." "Yes. And it cannot, quite. The combination of your shadow and mine is not something it has encountered before, I think. It knows you are dangerous. It does not yet know how." Defense against the dark arts was, objectively, the worst taught class Harry had. Quirrell taught it with the scattered, nervous energy of someone performing nervousness over a substrate of something far colder, and the content was thin, watered-down theory, barely adequate practical coverage, a general sense that the class was being run by someone whose mind was on other things. Most students found this disappointing. Harry found it a reliable cover for observation. He didn't underperform. He answered questions when called on with the precise, complete accuracy of someone who has done the reading, and otherwise held his silence. Quirrell's eyes slid to him every few minutes, the way eyes slide to the thing in the room that doesn't fit the expected pattern. "It is growing frustrated," Atem said, during the fourth class. "It expected to read you easily. It expected a child." "It got a child," Harry said. "It got a child with a 3,000-year-old pharaoh for a shadow," Atem said. "That is not the same thing." The first real test came on a Thursday, in the corridor between Transfiguration and the library. Harry was walking alone, Hermione had gone ahead to return a book, Ron had stopped to talk to a Hufflepuff second year about something Quidditch-related, when Quirrell appeared from around the corner. Not dramatically, not threateningly. He was just there, walking in the same direction, and then they were at the same pace, and then Quirrell said, "Mr. Potter. A moment, if you don't mind." "Of course, Professor," Harry said. How are you finding your classes?" The stutter was precise, Harry thought. Present in exactly the spaces where you'd expect a nervous man to stutter, absent in the spaces where a genuinely nervous man might also lose his footing. "Very well," Harry said. "Defense in particular?" Quirrell said. "I worry sometimes that my teaching is not quite, you seem a bright boy." "I'd hate for you to feel, I find the class very useful," Harry said honestly. "I learn a lot from observation." A fractional pause. The corridor was empty around them, which Harry had noted before Quirrell spoke and noted more pointedly now. "Observation of what, precisely?" "Everything," Harry said, looking forward, walking comfortably, entirely at ease. "Magical environments. People's interactions with them. How people move in spaces where they feel safe versus spaces where they feel watched." He paused. "It's a habit I developed early." Another pause, longer. Harry felt the thing behind the turban focus its attention on him the way a lens focuses light, gathered, precise, hot at the point of concentration. He let his shadow sit quiet and deep and didn't respond to it, the way you don't respond to someone who is testing whether you know they're watching. "Very philosophical for a first year," Quirrell said. "I had a long summer," Harry said pleasantly. They arrived at the library entrance. Harry stopped, turned, and gave Quirrell the same steady, pleasant expression he had given Malfoy on the train, open, attentive, entirely without intimidation and entirely without deference, the face of someone who sees exactly what's there and isn't bothered by it. "Thank you for checking in, Professor," he said. Quirrell looked at him. Behind the stutter and the nervous surface and the garlic smell and the thin, tired smile of a man performing his own anxiety, the thing looked at Harry from whatever space it occupied, and Harry looked back at it, and neither of them said what they were actually doing. "Of course," Quirrell said, and went in the other direction. "Well done," Atem said. "It knows now that I know," Harry said. "Yes. Which changes the shape of what happens next." Atem was quiet for a moment. A hidden enemy is predictable in their hiddenness, they behave according to the logic of concealment. An enemy who knows they are seen changes their strategy. "We will need to pay attention." "We will," Harry agreed, and went to find Hermione. The library was warm and ordered and smelled of the specific combination of old paper and preservation charms that had become, over the past weeks, one of Harry's favorite smells in the castle. Hermione was at their usual table, 3 books open, and she looked up when Harry sat down with the attentiveness of someone who has been in a silent conversation with their own thoughts and is switching channels. "How was your afternoon?" she said. "Informative," Harry said. "Can I borrow your notes from History of Magic?" She pushed them over. He copied what he needed and read alongside her for an hour, and the comfortable industry of the thing, the quiet table, the books, the lamp between them casting warm light on the pages, settled around him. "Harry," Hermione said, after a while. "Yes." She was looking at him over her book with those quick, direct eyes. "The Dementor on the train," she said. "What you did, I've been reading about shadow magic. Or trying to. There isn't much in the Hogwarts library, but I found references in 3 different texts. The oldest one calls it the oldest recorded form of magical practice, predating wand use entirely. It says practitioners are very rare, and that the ones who exist tend to be." She stopped. "What?" Harry said. "The word the text uses is anchored," she said. "Like they have a different relationship to the boundary between the visible world and what the text calls the space beneath it. Like they stand in both at once and neither one has." She paused. "Is that what you do?" Harry considered this for a moment. "More or less," he said. "Does it require the puzzle?" she said. He looked at her. She met his eyes without wavering. This was what he liked about Hermione. She was curious in the exact right direction, which was forward, and she asked her questions from a position of genuine inquiry rather than judgment. She'd noticed the puzzle was connected to his abilities weeks ago and had been building a model of it in her own careful way, and she was now presenting her model for review rather than demanding he confirm it, which was the correct scientific procedure. "Not entirely," he said. "But the puzzle is part of the picture." She nodded, took this note with the same precision she took all notes, and said, "The text suggests that shadow magic doesn't follow the same mechanical rules as wand-based magic. It says the most dangerous misconception is treating them as the same system." "They're not," Harry said. "They're related the way written language and spoken language are related. They express the same things but they're different media with different properties." She added this to her notes without comment. "Then, the thing on the train. The Dementor. Do you know what it was doing there?" "No," Harry said. "I've been thinking about it. The train is guarded, it's a regular Hogsmeade weekend procedure," she said, which meant she'd found this in Hogwarts, a history. "They patrol the perimeter of Hogsmeade and sometimes approach the station. But they're not supposed to board the train." "So something drew it," Harry said. "Or someone," Hermione said, and they looked at each other for a moment. Harry looked toward the library door, and then up, as if looking at the castle around him. "Not a student," he said. "Above our pay grade." She was quiet for a moment. "I hate that phrase." "So do I," Harry said honestly. "Which is why I'm not accepting it as a final answer." She almost smiled. "Good." Dinner that night was lamb stew that was excellent and treacle tart that was better, and Ron was in the best mood Harry had seen him in since they'd arrived because he'd beaten 4 fifth years at chess in a row and been challenged by a 6th year who had a wizard chess rating of some kind that Ron hadn't known wizard chess had ratings, and had beaten him in 14 moves. He cried a bit, Ron reported, with a complicated expression that was equal parts guilt and satisfaction. Not really cried, just, his eyes went. "I felt terrible." "You didn't," Hermione said. "A bit I did," Ron said. "Then he asked for a rematch and I didn't feel terrible anymore." Harry ate his treacle tart and listened to the hall around him and felt the castle's deep, humming consciousness around him, and thought about what Hermione had said about the Dementor, and thought about Quirrell in the corridor, and thought about the vault at Gringotts that had activated the moment the puzzle was complete, and thought about the way Dumbledore's eyes at the high table had been doing that distant, measuring thing every time Harry happened to look up. There were at least 4 games running simultaneously in this castle, he thought. Maybe more. Some of the players knew about each other and some didn't, and the board they were all playing on was the same board, which meant the moves interfered with each other in ways that none of the players were fully accounting for. In Kemet, Atem said, following the current of his thoughts in the way of someone who had been there long enough to follow currents, when multiple factions were playing simultaneously, the decisive advantage always went to the player who could see all the boards at once. How do you get that vantage point? You build it, Atem said. Deliberately. By gathering information from every board without being seen as belonging to any of them. A pause. Which you are doing. We are doing, Harry corrected. A pause that was warm and brief. We are doing, Atem agreed. The morning that the potions incident happened, Harry had been in the library before breakfast. He'd found a book, thin, bound in something that wasn't quite leather, tucked behind a larger volume on the restricted shelf that he'd been given a note to access by McGonagall for transfiguration research, that wasn't a transfiguration text at all. It was older than anything else on the shelf, and its title was in a script that Harry had spent enough of the summer studying to partially read, Rites of the Shadow Threshold, Boundaries of the Living and the Dead. He'd taken it back to the Gryffindor table at breakfast and was reading it over his porridge when Ron arrived, dropped into his seat, and said, "You're going to go blind if you read over food every morning," in the tone of someone who has said this before and expects to say it again. "I've been fine so far," Harry said. "What is it?" Ron craned to look. "That's not on the first-year list." "Restricted section," Harry said. McGonagall note. "Anything interesting?" Harry turned the book to show Ron a passage he'd been working through, a description of what happened to a soul that was separated from its body without being properly released to do it, which had a number of implications for a scar on an 11-year-old boy that Harry was carefully not drawing final conclusions about yet. Ron looked at it. "That's dark." "It's history," Harry said. "Sometimes those are the same," Ron said, which was occasionally exactly right. The potions incident happened at the end of the second week. Snape said a practical, a simple strengthening solution, straightforward enough, and Harry brewed it efficiently and correctly, and had just finished cleaning his workspace when he became aware that Snape was standing at his shoulder. "Your technique," Snape said, and his voice had that particular quality of someone who has decided to use a specific tool, "is unusual. Where did you learn it?" "Reading," Harry said. "Reading," Snape repeated, with a tone that was carefully balanced between the dismissive and the genuinely curious, and if Harry had been anyone else he'd have caught only the dismissive. "There are textbooks and there are competent potioneers. Reading produces the former. Your stirring pattern is the latter. Where did you actually learn it?" Harry looked up at him. "My stirring pattern is counterclockwise on the reduction, clockwise on the combination, and I adjusted the heat twice based on color rather than time. That's in Chapter 4 of Advanced Potion Making. I haven't had lessons from anyone." Snape looked at him for a moment. In the class around them, people were pretending to clean their workspaces and were in fact listening with every available faculty. Malfoy, across the room, had his head down but his posture was at full attention. "And your results," Snape said, "are above grade level. Significantly." He paused. "That is not flattery, Potter. It is an assessment, and assessments from me are dispassionate." "I know," Harry said. "You are either exceptionally gifted or exceptionally prepared," Snape said, "and I am attempting to determine which, because they require different responses." "Both," Harry said. "And they don't require different responses. They require the same response, harder work." Snape was very still. Then he made a sound that was not quite a sound, more like a considered breath, and moved away to the next workspace. Harry looked back at his clean cauldron and kept his expression entirely neutral. "Snape," Atem said, "is the most complicated shadow in this building after Quirrell's passenger." "He's interesting," Harry agreed. "More than interesting." A pause. "He is a man who has chosen a loyalty that costs him something every day and does not discuss the cost with anyone. That is either admirable or concerning, depending on what the loyalty is." "I think it's admirable," Harry said. "I think the loyalty is to something that doesn't know it has him." Atem was quiet for a moment. "That," he said, "is one of the loneliest things you have ever said." "I know," Harry said, and packed his bag and went to lunch. The morning that changed things was the last Friday of October, when Harry woke at 4 a.m. because something was walking in the castle. Not footsteps. Not the sound of someone moving. The feeling of something moving, a pattern in the shadow, a disruption in the hum of the castle's consciousness, the way a heavy thing pressing on one side of a floating surface changes the distribution everywhere else. Harry sat up in the dark of the dormitory, Ron breathing steadily to his left, Neville's curtains drawn, the fire banked down to embers, and listened with what Atem was teaching him to call his second sense, the shadow feeling that was getting sharper every week. "What is it?" he asked. Atem was already fully awake. He was sometimes, Harry had noticed, already awake when Harry woke, as if he slept less or differently. "Someone is in the third-floor corridor," he said. "The restricted one. And they are looking at something they very much want." Harry got out of bed. "You don't have to go now," Atem said, not in objection, but in the neutral voice of someone providing complete information. "Nothing is happening tonight. This is reconnaissance." "Then I should also do reconnaissance," Harry said, pulling his invisibility cloak from under his mattress. It had been in the family vault, the secondary one, folded in the linen with the shadow cards, as if put there deliberately, and throwing it over himself. "Of course," Atem said. "I was not suggesting you stay in bed. I was noting the stakes." The corridor was empty by the time Harry reached it, but it wasn't undisturbed. He stood at the locked door and felt the edges of what had been there, a shadow residue, the specific trace that very dark magic leaves behind the way cigarette smoke leaves smell, and underneath it, the locked door's particular quality, which was fear. Not just protection. Fear. Whatever was behind this door was worth protecting from someone who was afraid. He went back to bed. In the morning, he started a new page in the small notebook he'd been keeping, observations, dates, times, connections, and added what he'd felt, and drew a line between it and Quirrell's name. The line was getting longer. Chapter 5, The third-floor corridor and the shape of fear. Halloween at Hogwarts was loud in the specific way of a place that commits to its celebrations with institutional sincerity. By the time Harry came down to breakfast on the 31st, the Great Hall already had live bats cycling the ceiling in lazy figure-eights, and the carved pumpkins lining every table were larger than seemed architecturally justified, casting orange light across the faces of students who were in the particular mood of a school day that promises something better at the end of it. Harry ate his eggs and watched the bats. In Kemet, Atem said, bats were considered navigators of the space between worlds. They move by what they cannot see. There is a temple inscription, in the valley, I think, though my memory of the geography has some gaps, that describes them as the Pharaoh's scouts in Duat. And here they're just decoration, Harry said. Most sacred things become decoration eventually, Atem said, without bitterness. That is the nature of time. Hermione arrived with a book about the historical origins of Halloween that she had opinions about, delivered with the focused energy of someone who finds the distance between the popular version and the historical one personally offensive. Ron arrived 6 minutes later and ate 3 sausages before she'd finished her first paragraph, which was Ron's particular form of polite attention. The day was ordinary until it wasn't. Charms passed without incident. History of Magic was Professor Binns in full ghost voice monotone. He died mid-lecture decades ago and hadn't noticed, as far as anyone could tell, and his classes had the soporific quality of very warm rooms and very droning voices. Harry didn't sleep during History of Magic. He sat at the back and read the rites of the Shadow Threshold text under the desk, because the information in it was useful and Binns' topic today, the International Warlock Convention of 1289, was available verbatim in 3 different books Harry had already read. It was after herbology, in the corridor between the greenhouses and the main castle entrance, that Harry felt it. Not the thing from the 3rd floor, different from that, lower in register, more immediate. The castle's shadow shifting, the way it shifts when something that doesn't belong in a space enters the space. He stopped walking. Students flowed around him on both sides, a river parting around a standing stone. Troll, Atem said, with the precise calmness of someone who has processed the information completely before speaking. Large. Somewhat to the east. Moving through the lower corridor, not wandering. Something has directed it. Harry was already turning. Ron, he said, cutting through the student traffic to where Ron was walking with Neville 2 steps behind. "Where is Hermione?" Ron blinked at his tone. "Library, I think. She said she was going before dinner." "The lower east corridor," Harry said, and went. He was moving at a pace below running, the specific quickened walk of someone who needs to cover ground without creating the kind of alarm that causes stampedes, with Ron behind him matching the pace without being told to, which was one of the things Harry would later think about and understand, that Ron's instinct in a crisis was never to ask clarifying questions first. His instinct was to move and ask while moving. "What's happening?" Ron said, matching Harry's stride. "Troll," Harry said. A beat. "In the castle. Eastern corridor. Hermione's there." Ron's pace increased immediately. "No further questions." "Second left," Atem said, then straight through the archway. "The troll is moving northward and will intersect the library access corridor in approximately." Harry was already through the second left. The smell hit them first, the particular assault of troll, which was wet stone and something decomposing, and underneath it all a low animal heat, the smell of something very large that has been recently active. And then the sound, enormous footsteps, irregular, the pattern of something that walks by weight rather than coordination, each step arriving a half beat later than expected, like a very slow metronome. The troll filled the corridor the way a bad idea fills a room, completely, leaving no space for alternatives. It was approximately 12 feet of matted gray bulk, carrying a club the size of a small car with one hand and dragging the knuckles of the other along the stone floor in a way that made a sound Harry could feel in his back teeth. Its head was small and set low, like an afterthought. It hadn't seen them yet. At the far end of the corridor, 20 feet past the troll, which was 10 feet past the bathroom door, Hermione had pressed herself against the wall with the contained stillness of someone who has decided that the worst thing she can do is move, her wand out and her face a composition of precise, controlled fear. Not panicking. Thinking. But thinking in a situation where the available options were all equally terrible. Harry looked at the troll. He looked at the walls, old stone, ceiling vaulted, torches in brackets on both sides. He looked at the bathroom door and at Hermione's position relative to it. "The ceiling," Atem said. "The brackets." Harry raised his wand. He didn't say the incantation. He'd been doing that more and more. Flitwick had noticed it and mentioned it with an expression of professional curiosity that Harry had deflected politely, but the truth was that the verbal formula for what he was doing and the actual mechanism of what he was doing had already separated in his practice into two different things, and the actual mechanism didn't require the words. It required intent, channeled through the wand as a focus, precise and complete. Both torch brackets on the right wall tore loose from the stone simultaneously. Not hurled, dropped, with precision, onto the troll's head in quick succession, the way you drop stones into a pond to see where the rings intersect. The troll stumbled. Its club swung wide, hit the left wall, left a crater in the stone. It turned toward Harry, away from Hermione, with the confused aggression of something that has been annoyed by something it can't see. "Hermione, door," Harry said, at the normal volume of someone giving a straightforward instruction. She moved. Into the bathroom, through it, and Harry heard the lock click with the precision of someone who does not do things halfway. The troll swung its club at the space where the brackets had been, missed, hit the ceiling, rained plaster. Ron had flattened himself against the right wall with his wand out and the expression of someone watching a crisis unfold at a pace they're struggling to match and catching up fast. "It's wand hand," Harry said. "Trolls don't have wands," Ron said. "It's club hand," Harry corrected. "Can you levitate it?" Ron's eyes went to the club. Back to Harry. He understood, not the full strategy, but the relevant piece of it, which was enough. He pointed his wand at the club and said, "Wingardium Leviosa," with a focus and precision that Flitwick would have marked outstanding. The club rose. Straight up, which the troll did not expect, and for 2 seconds the troll stood holding nothing and looking at a floating club with the specific expression of something that has only one method of engaging with problems and has just been deprived of it. Harry stepped forward. Not running, walking, directly, the walk of someone moving through a space they have assessed and found manageable. He had his wand at his side. His shadow preceded him slightly, the way it sometimes did when Atem's presence was very close to the surface. He stopped 4 feet from the troll. "It is not intelligent," Atem said. "But it is not entirely without instinct. Something in the deep animal part of it knows what you are." The troll looked at Harry. Harry looked at the troll. He let the shadow come forward, not aggressively, not performatively, just present, the way the sea is present at the edge of the shore, simply there and very large. The eye of the puzzle, under his shirt, warmed. The troll took 1 step back. Harry held the contact for 3 seconds. Then he reached up with his left hand and tapped the wall beside him, twice, a specific pattern, and the wall sconce on the far end of the corridor, the one the troll hadn't noticed, extinguished. The corridor plunged to near dark. In the dark, things were different. Harry's second sense expanded naturally. Shadow in darkness was the same as vision in light, the world resolving in a different medium. The troll was not comfortable in the dark in the way of things that understand, at a biological level, that darkness contains things they cannot see. It turned and went back the way it had come. Not running, trolls didn't run, but with the purposeful lumber of something that has decided this corridor is an error. Ron lowered his wand. The club dropped with a sound like a small earthquake. The lights flickered back. "How," Ron said, "did you do that?" "Dark," Harry said, and went to the bathroom door and knocked. "It's gone. You can come out." A pause. Then the lock clicked and the door opened. Hermione stood in the doorway with her wand still drawn and her chin raised at an angle that suggested she would very much like to appear composed and was almost entirely succeeding. Her eyes went to the crater in the left wall, the 2 torn bracket marks in the right wall, the fallen club. Then to Harry. "It's gone," she said. "East corridor," Harry said. "McGonagall will have it contained before it gets past the second staircase." He paused. "Are you all right?" She looked at him, and then passed him to Ron, and then back to Harry. Something in her composure shifted, not breaking, just becoming something different, something more honest than composure. "I was frightened," she said, as if reporting it rather than feeling it, the way Hermione processed most things, through language, through naming. "Yes," Harry said. "That was appropriate." "It didn't help," she said. "No," he said. "Fear rarely helps in the moment. It helps before, it tells you what to prepare for, and after, it tells you what to remember." He paused. "During, you just have to work through it." She was quiet for a moment. Then she stepped out of the bathroom doorway and stood in the corridor, and looked at the damage again, and her chin went up another fraction. "I had a plan," she said, with a defensive edge. "I know," Harry said. "I was going to try levitating the club myself," she said. "I had the wand angle right. I just needed a clear sight line," Harry said. "The troll was in the way." "Yes." She looked at him. "You moved it." "I gave it something more interesting to look at," he said. "You would have done the same if you'd had a moment." Something in her expression softened, not gratitude exactly, or not only that, but the specific relief of someone who has been given credit for the thing they were attempting rather than only the thing they failed to complete. "Yes," she said. "I would have." Ron looked between them. "Right," he said, with the easy good nature of someone who has processed the crisis and is ready to move on, "we should probably tell McGonagall we're not dead." The teachers found them coming out of the corridor, McGonagall, sharp and rapid, Quirrell behind her, and Dumbledore behind Quirrell. McGonagall's eyes went immediately to the damage and then to the 3 of them with an expression that contained relief, alarm, and professional interrogation all at once, which was impressive. "What happened?" she said. "Troll in the corridor," Harry said. "I directed it away from Hermione and toward the east exit. I'd suggest sealing the east entrance from the grounds, it came in from outside." McGonagall looked at the damage again. You directed a mountain troll, she said. More redirected, Harry said. I didn't want to fight it. It was easier to give it a reason to leave. She looked at him for a long moment, with the specific expression of someone who has taught at Hogwarts for many decades and thought they had encountered the full range of student behavior and is confronting evidence that they had not. Quite, she said, and there was something underneath the word, not the warm approval she gave when someone produced an excellent transfiguration, but something older and more complicated than that, like seeing something you recognize from a story. Behind her, Quirrell was very still. His eyes were on Harry with that particular focused attention that had nothing to do with the stutter or the nervousness. Harry met his eyes for exactly 1 second, long enough to confirm the contact, and looked away. The thing behind the turban had felt the shadow in the corridor. He was certain of it. It did, Atem confirmed. And it is revising its assessment of us. Good, Harry said. Let it. They were sent to the hospital wing, precautionary, Madame Pomfrey's brisk assessment, no injuries, 10 points each from McGonagall for presence of mind, 50 points deducted for being in the corridor in the first place, and then 30 restored after Hermione explained that she hadn't known about the troll warning because she'd been in the library. McGonagall's expression during this recalculation was one of the finer things Harry had ever witnessed. The Halloween feast was extraordinary even accounting for context, and Ron ate enough for 2 people and a half, and Hermione sat beside Harry and was quieter than usual in a way that was thoughtful rather than withdrawn, and twice Harry caught her looking at the puzzle outline under his shirt with those quick, building eyes. He didn't explain. Not yet. There was an order to things and he was feeling his way along it. It was Neville, the following morning, who brought up the mirror. He'd been exploring. Neville explored the castle the way anxious people sometimes explore unfamiliar spaces, in long, solo late-night walks that were partly insomnia and partly the specific need to understand where the exits are. He'd found, in the 6th-floor corridor on the left, a room that wasn't on any map, a room that wasn't supposed to be there, he said, because last week it had been a broom closet and this week it was something significantly larger, and inside it was a mirror. An enormous mirror, Neville said, over breakfast, with the expression of someone who has been awake since 3 thinking about something. Floor to ceiling. Old frame, gold, had writing carved in it I couldn't read. And when I looked in it, he stopped. What did you see? Hermione asked. Neville was quiet for a moment. My parents, he said. Healthy. His voice was carefully flat, the flatness of someone ironing a large feeling into a manageable shape. Standing behind me, both of them. My mum was, she looked like someone had given her everything back. He picked up his toast, not eating it. But they're in St. Mungo's. They have been since I was a year old. The table was quiet. Harry felt the mirror's description settling against everything Atem had been teaching him about objects that held power, and something clicked. I know what that is, he said internally. Yes, Atem said, with a gravity that was specific and careful. The mirror of Erist. Desire spelled backward, the inscription must be in that encrypted form. In my time, objects like this were called desire traps. They were not considered benign. What do? They show the viewer the deepest desire of their heart, Atem said. And they do it so vividly, so completely, that the viewer's shadow mistakes the image for a potential future rather than a present fiction. The danger is staying. The longer someone looks, the more the image becomes a substitute for action. A pause. People have starved in front of objects like this. Harry looked at Neville, who was looking at his uneaten toast. The mirror shows what you want most, Harry said, quietly. Whatever you want most. Yes, Neville said. Did you stay long? I went back 2 more times, Neville said, with the honesty of someone confessing something they already feel guilty about. Last night was the 3rd. It's hard to leave. Harry nodded. He understood the mechanism, and he understood why it was hard, and he understood that telling Neville it was dangerous wouldn't accomplish half of what something else might. What would your parents want for you? He said. If they could want things, right now. What would they want you doing at 4 in the morning? Neville was very still. Sleeping, he said, after a moment. Yes, Harry said. Neville put his toast down. Picked it back up. Ate it. Said nothing else about the mirror, but the quality of his silence had changed, from the silence of suppressed longing to the silence of someone who has accepted a thing and is letting it be what it is. Harry went to see the mirror himself that evening, after dinner, with the deliberateness of someone who doesn't walk into situations they haven't assessed. He brought neither Ron nor Hermione, not to exclude them, but because what he expected to happen in front of the mirror was private, or might be, and he wanted to find out before he decided whether to share it. The room was as Neville had described, larger than it should be, arrived at through a door that had been something else recently, and the mirror dominating the far wall with its enormous, tarnished gold frame. The inscription ran across the top in a flowing script, Eris stra eru oit ube kafru oit onwosi. He worked the reversal as he read it. I show not your face but your heart's desire. The candelabra on either side were lit. His reflection appeared, 11 years old, thin, hair that refused to lie down, wearing Dudley's old jumper and his own steady expression, and then shifted. The room behind his reflection filled with people. Not just any people, the specific warmth of them, the way they arranged around him, made his chest tighten in the way of something long compressed suddenly having space. There was a woman with red hair and green eyes, the same green as his, who was laughing at something someone had said, and a man with dark hair and glasses who had one hand on Harry's shoulder in the easy way of a person who does this all the time, like it's the most natural thing in the world. And behind them, slightly to the right, a presence that wasn't quite visual, that resolved, when Harry looked at it, into the shape of a young man, regal, dark-skinned, with white hair and tricolored, and eyes that were amber and warm. Atem. In the mirror. Standing with Harry's family. I see it, Atem said, and his voice was different, thinner at the edges, like light through a very old window. I did not expect to be in it. Neither did I, Harry said. This is interesting, Atem said, and he meant it as a scholar means it, the word doing double duty for something considerably larger, because actually naming the thing might be more than either of them had the vocabulary for. Harry looked at the mirror for a very long time. He looked at his mother's eyes and his father's hands and at the image of his own face, which in the mirror looked slightly younger and considerably more relaxed than it did in any actual reflective surface. He looked at Atem's image standing with his family like someone who belonged there. And then he turned around and walked out. Not because it didn't hurt. It did, it hurt in the specific clean way that honest longing hurts, without complication, without shame, just the pure ache of the truth of want. He turned around because Atem had told him what the mirror was, and he believed it, and the image was not a possibility. It was a snapshot of absence dressed as presence, and staying would teach him nothing except how to want something he couldn't have, and that lesson he already knew by heart. Are you all right? Atem asked, in the corridor outside. Yes, Harry said. You are certain? What I want is real, Harry said. The mirror is not. Spending time with the image is the same as spending time with the wanting and not with the actual pursuit of the thing. He paused. My parents are gone. That's fixed. You're here. That's not fixed, that's present, which is different, and better. Atem was quiet for a very long moment. I have lived for 3,000 years, he said, in a puzzle, and through you, and without anything resembling what that mirror showed. A pause, and his voice was careful in the way of someone carrying something fragile. And I think you may have just said the most important thing either of us has said to the other. Which part? You're here, Atem said. That's present, which is different, and better. Harry walked back to Gryffindor Tower with his hands in his pockets and his shadow steady and the puzzle warm against his chest, and didn't look back. The Gringotts letter arrived on the 14th of November. It came with the Morning Post, Ka dropping it on top of Harry's porridge with the air of a courier who considers the state of the recipient's breakfast irrelevant. The letter was on heavy cream parchment with a crest he recognized, the Gringotts double-headed dragon, and when he opened it, the writing inside was dense and formal and goblin-precise. Dear Master Potter, it is our obligation to inform you that our security team has identified evidence of unauthorized attempted access to Vault 713, dated the night of October 31st. The attempt was unsuccessful, the vault's standard protections were intact and remain so. However, as the holder of multiple accounts with this institution, we felt it necessary to inform you promptly. Additionally, our review of the Potter family accounts, following your recent visit, has revealed certain secondary wardings on Vault 12 which appear to have been placed recently, within the last month, by an external magical signature our analysts have been unable to classify. These wardings are not hostile to the vault's contents. In our assessment they are protective in nature. We thought you should be aware of this finding. Please be advised that your accounts remain secure. Harry read the letter twice. Then he passed it to Hermione, who was watching him with her teacup halfway to her mouth. She read it. Her teacup went back to its saucer. The 31st, she said. Halloween. The troll, Harry said. A distraction, she said. A distraction, Harry agreed. Someone wanted the teachers in the wrong corridor and everyone else in the Great Hall. And Vault 713, she said, and her eyes were very quick and bright, following the logic to its end. What's in Vault 713? I don't know, Harry said honestly. Hagrid collected something from it the day we went. He was very specifically not telling me what. Ron, who had been eating throughout and following this at a slight lag, said, something worth breaking into Gringotts for. Something worth using a troll as cover, Harry said. Which means someone with access to a troll, or the ability to get one into the castle. That's not straightforward, Hermione said. Mountain trolls are classified as XXXX, extremely dangerous, controlled. Getting one to Hogwarts would require either very specific knowledge or help from inside, Ron said. The three of them were quiet for a moment. Quirrell, Hermione said, at just below conversational volume. Harry didn't confirm or deny it. He folded the letter and put it in his jacket, and finished his porridge, and looked at the ceiling of the Great Hall where the enchanted sky was doing a pale November grey that was the same color as waiting. The secondary wardings, Atem said. On Vault 12. The ones they cannot classify. You, Harry said. Yes, Atem said. When you carried the puzzle near the vault, I extended certain protections. Instinctively, it was the kind of thing I simply did when something needed protection, in my time. I did not fully consider that Gringotts might notice. They noticed, Harry said. They called the wardings protective, Atem said. Not hostile. Which means they are accurate analysts. Did you protect the whole vault? Harry asked. Everything in it, Atem said. The shadow cards. The books. Everything that carries shadow resonance. A pause. Including any record of my existence. Harry considered this. Thank you, he said. You are welcome, Atem said, with the simplicity of someone for whom protection is as natural as breathing, and who doesn't require thanks for it, and who receives it anyway. The conversation with Dumbledore happened at 4 o'clock on a Thursday, in the way that conversations with Dumbledore apparently happened. A note delivered by an owl in the afternoon requesting his presence after classes in a way that was entirely voluntary and entirely not. The headmaster's office was extraordinary. Harry had been curious about it and it delivered on the curiosity, circular, warm, containing portraits of sleeping headmasters who were pretending to sleep, shelves of silver instruments that turned and clicked in their own private frequencies, a very large desk behind which Dumbledore sat with his hands folded and his half-moon spectacles on and his expression of warm, grandfatherly openness that had the specific quality of something very carefully maintained. Fawkes the Phoenix was on his perch and regarded Harry with the steady, burning eyes of a creature that has lived several lifetimes and is on its current one. Harry regarded it back, and felt Atem's attention intensify slightly. Extraordinary creature, Atem said, quietly. We called them Bennu birds, in my time. We believe they were the first creature to land on the primordial mound at the moment of creation. Associated with associated with renewal. Are they dangerous? They are old, Atem said. Old things are their own category. Harry, Dumbledore said, with the warmth of someone who has been looking forward to this and is making sure you feel it. Please, sit down. Lemon drop. No thank you, Harry said, and sat. The office was quiet except for the instruments. Outside the window, November sky was purple with almost dark, and the lights of the castle were coming on one by one, warm against the cold. Dumbledore looked at Harry with those blue eyes that had the quality he'd noticed at the feast, long-distance eyes, eyes that were measuring something beyond the immediate. I have been meaning to speak with you, Dumbledore said. You have made quite an impression, Harry. On the staff, on your housemates. He paused. On the castle. The castle is impressionable, Harry said pleasantly. A small smile. It is, yes. It is very old, and old places have long memories. He tilted his head slightly. You seem comfortable here. More comfortable, perhaps, than most new students. I feel at home, Harry said. Ah. Dumbledore's eyes stayed warm and stayed measuring simultaneously. That is good to hear. You spent several years in a very different sort of home, I know. I have sometimes worried whether Privet Drive was what it was, Harry said, without rancor, without heat. I learned things there that I wouldn't have learned anywhere else. I don't think that was the design, but that's what happened. Dumbledore was quiet for a moment in the way of someone who expected a different response and is deciding what to do with the actual one. You are very composed, for someone of your age and experience, he said, carefully. You're very careful, Harry said, just as carefully, for someone having a casual conversation. A pause. Not uncomfortable, Dumbledore's expression didn't shift into discomfort, but something behind it did, the way the light in a room shifts slightly when someone opens a window somewhere else. You are observant, Dumbledore said. You knew I would be, Harry said. You've been watching me since the sorting. I watch all my students, Dumbledore said. You watch me differently, Harry said. You watch me the way someone watches a chessboard when a piece has moved unexpectedly. Not alarmed, curious. But considering the implications. Dumbledore set down his lemon drop with the specific gentleness of someone setting aside one strategy and considering another. And what, he said, with something that was genuine now, the warmth still there but the careful management somewhat reduced, do you think I am considering? He is asking you a real question, Atem said. Not a trap. He wants to know how much you see. I think, Harry said, looking at the headmaster with the same steady, open directness he'd given to everything from the mirror of Eris to the troll, that you have a plan that predates me. That the plan is large and has been running for a long time and has certain expected parameters. And that I am not meeting the expected parameters, and you are not yet certain whether that is good or bad for the plan. Dumbledore looked at him for a very long moment. The portraits on the walls, who had all stopped pretending to sleep some minutes ago, were watching with the focused attention of people who have seen a great many headmaster conversations and recognize an unusual one. You are, Dumbledore said finally, remarkably astute. The plan is for me to be a weapon, Harry said, not accusatorially, not bitterly, just clearly, the way you name a thing you have thought through and arrived at. I'm not angry about it. I understand why someone who loves the world and wants to protect it might reach that conclusion. He paused. But I thought you should know that I know. It makes things simpler. The silence in the office lasted several seconds. Fawkes shifted on his perch and made a soft, warm sound. And what do you intend to do about it? Dumbledore said, and his voice had shed something, not the warmth, but the management around the warmth, and what remained was something more genuinely curious, and more genuinely respectful. The same thing I intended anyway, Harry said. Understand everything. Protect what matters. Win when winning is possible and survive when it isn't. He paused. I just prefer to do it as myself rather than as a symbol. Dumbledore looked at him for another long moment. Then he said, very quietly, your father would have said something very similar. Then he sounds like someone worth knowing, Harry said, and meant it absolutely. Dumbledore's expression, for just a moment, became something else entirely, not the headmaster, not the long strategist, just an old man who has loved a great many people and lost them, holding a new and unexpected thing carefully. Yes, he said. He was. Harry looked at Fawkes. Professor, he said. The thing on the third floor. It's being watched. Dumbledore's expression returned to its careful warmth, but under it now there was something attentive and very still. Is it, he said. Specifically, Harry said, by something that is not alive in the way of the living, and which arrived with one of your teachers. He met Dumbledore's eyes. I don't know yet what's down there, but I know what wants it. And I think you know both. A very long pause. I would ask, Dumbledore said carefully, how you know this. I would ask, Harry returned, with equal care, how you knew to put it there. They looked at each other. Outside, the November sky had gone fully dark, and the castle was all warm windows against it, and the portrait headmasters were absolutely rapt. I think, Dumbledore said at last, and the warmth in his voice was entirely unmanaged now, and therefore entirely genuine, that you and I will need to have a great many more conversations. I agree, Harry said. But probably not tonight. He stood. Dumbledore stood, which was itself a small signal. Dumbledore didn't stand when students left his office. It was a gesture offered to equals. Harry walked to the door. At the door, he paused. The mirror, he said, without turning. On the 6th floor. You'll want to move it. A student has been there several times. The longer it stays accessible, the more of a problem it becomes. A silence. Then, thank you, Harry. Harry left. In the corridor, the castle's shadow settled around him like a familiar coat, deep and familiar and humming, and Atem said nothing for a long moment, and then said, You did not tell him about me. No, Harry said. Why not? Harry thought about it. The answer was layered. There was the obvious layer, the tactical one, which was that an unknown advantage should stay unknown for as long as it was possible to maintain it. But underneath that was something more personal, more fundamental. Because you're mine, Harry said. Not his. Not the plans. Mine. He paused. And because some things don't need to be put on the board. Atem was quiet for long enough that Harry had gone up 2 staircases and turned into the 4th floor corridor before he spoke. In 3,000 years, Atem said, and his voice had the particular quality it had when he was saying something he was choosing to say fully rather than partially, I have been the possession of the puzzle, and the prisoner of the puzzle, and the soul within the puzzle. I have been called by every person who solved it, there were 4, across the centuries, though none lasted long, and in none of those cases did I feel, he paused. What you just said is the first time I have been called by a word I would choose for myself. What word? Harry asked. Yours, Atem said simply. Not a master's property. Not a weapon or a tool or a burden. Just, yours. The way something can belong to a person without being lesser than them. Harry walked up the final staircase to Gryffindor Tower and spoke the password to the fat lady and stepped through into the warmth and noise and firelight of his house, and sat down in his chair and opened his books. Yes, he said. Like that.